Chapter 577. At this point, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to hide it anymore. It was meaningless. He said, let's not beat around the bush. Since you don't want to do it, let Wen Lanfeng do it. It's for the good of the Wen family. Impossible. Wen Lanfeng can't kill an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator for no reason. He's not like Yin Baikong. If he were that kind of person, I wouldn't be friends with him. Nongzhu saw that Yu Qianqiu didn't want to give up, so she waved her hand and said, all right. Don't try to persuade me anymore. You figure it out yourself. He's just an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator. It's not worth it for a soul formation cultivator to do it. Don't you know some early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators? You'd better target them. Although I haven't seen Yan Zhuixing fight, I'm afraid even an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator is no match for him. Yu Qianqiu asked, do you believe me? It doesn't matter if I believe you or not. You figure it out yourself. I'll go back and tell Wen Lanfeng about the hipster. Nongzhu lifted her hand and removed the soundproof barrier. She opened the door and walked out slowly with her hands behind her back. Pedantic. I'll do it myself. Yu Qianqiu muttered and followed behind Nongzhu. When the door opened, everyone's eyes were fixed on the upstairs. They saw two people walk out one after another and walk down the stairs. The most eye-catching one was Niu Yud, who walked behind them. He was not an ordinary person. How many people dared to be as arrogant as him in the cultivation world? Even Yan Zhuixing's gaze towards him was filled with admiration. The hipster was afraid. This person was comparable to Mr. Nongzhu. As for the shopkeepers and workers in the shop, they were trembling with fear. Imagine what kind of person would dare to look down on the princess. Mr. Nongzhu, Senior Niu. A group of people saluted. The two of them nodded slightly in acknowledgement, both of them looking like experts. Nongzhu took the opportunity to take a serious look at Yan Zhuixing, and then glanced at hipster. Without saying anything, she walked out of the store and said to Wen Chongzheng, who was bowing at the door, let these people go back. Let's go. Wen Chongzheng hurriedly shouted at the leaders of the soldiers outside, and then chased after Nongzhu eagerly. As for the soldiers, they had no choice but to withdraw. Yu Qianqiu glanced at everyone expressionlessly. His eyes paused on Yan Zhuixing as he let out a sound of surprise. Yan Zhuixing and Man Hu exchanged glances with each other. They did not know what Niu Yud had seen. Yulan smiled and said, Senior Niu, is there something wrong? What's your name? Yu Qianqiu asked Yan Zhuixing. With a faint smile, Yan Zhuixing bowed politely and said, I'm Yan Zhuixing. What can I do for you, Senior? Yu Qianqiu looked at hipster and the shopkeepers in the shop and said, Yulan do, ask the irrelevant people to leave. Everyone understood the meaning behind his words. Some topics related to cultivators were naturally inconvenient for mortals to know. Yulan Du took the order and immediately asked the shopkeeper and the waiters to leave. The shopkeeper and the waiters did not dare to object, so they all left obediently. Under Yulan Du's instructions, the waiters even carried the 4 unconscious guards out. Only when hipster was invited, she looked at Yan Zhuixing reluctantly, as if asking for his opinion. Yan Zhuixing smiled and nodded to her. Hipster then pouted and went out. Yulan Du was very meticulous. He even released his divine sense to check every corner of the restaurant. After making sure there was no one, he cupped his hands and said, Senior, it's done. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand to indicate that he understood. He stared at Yan Zhuixing and sized him up. Sometimes he shook his head and sometimes he sighed. The group of people were baffled by the commotion. After a while, Senior Niu asked, You are Yan Zhuixing, right? Yes. Yan Zhuixing looked calm on the surface, but he was pondering in his heart. Strange. I've seen countless people, but I've never seen someone like you. Yu Qianchou clicked his tongue and asked, "Do you cultivate some kind of strange cultivation method?" "Not bad." Man Hu and the others were shocked. They did not expect Niu Yu to be so powerful. He could actually see that Yan Zhuixing cultivated a special cultivation method. He was indeed an expert who dared to attack the forces of various countries. Even their master, Bing Chengzi, could not be compared to him. He was too powerful. Yan Zhuixing's calm eyes were also moved. The few of them were not inexperienced people, so they quickly concealed it. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du could see that something was wrong with such an obvious reaction. The two of them exchanged glances. "Senior, you are overpraising me. The cultivation method that Junior cultivates is not special. It is a cultivation method passed down by the 10,000 demons in the Chinese cultivation world." Yan Zhuixing explained. "Passed down my ass. Isn't Qiu Wuyuan a disciple of the 10,000 demons? Isn't he better than you in the sword drawing competition?" Yu Qianchou also saw some clues from their brief shock. He knew that he had guessed correctly. He glanced at Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du from the corner of his eyes. He stared at Yan Zhuixing and shook his head. "Brat, you might be able to hide it from others, but you can't hide it from my eyes. Although I don't know what cultivation method you are cultivating, if the 10,000 demons had such a cultivation method, I'm afraid that the entire cultivation world would have already surrendered to the 10,000 demons. The top 10 experts of the cultivation world would all have to step aside." These words were too frightening to hear. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du stared at Yan Zhuixing with eagle-like eyes. What a joke. This brat actually possessed a peerless cultivation method that even the top 10 experts of the cultivation world would have to step aside. How could that be? Didn't Niu Yu say that this was a cultivation method that could make the entire cultivation world surrender? Man Hu and the others were shocked again. This Niu Yu was too powerful. Everything he said was true. The demonic book was indeed a heaven-defying cultivation method. They felt that they shouldn't have stayed in Lan City this time. They shouldn't have met Niu Yu. This time, they were in big trouble. Once this news spread, the consequences could be imagined. The four of them were tense on the inside but relaxed on the outside. Their eyes were faintly staring at Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du. If this terrifying Niu Yu was not here, the four of them would have killed them on the spot. They would never allow the two of them to spread the secret. "Senior, your joke is too big. If this spreads, I won't be able to bear it," Yan Zhuixing said with a smile on his face. In his heart, he wished that he could kill this person. But for now, he wouldn't dare even if he had 10 guts. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. At least until now, he had never seen such a powerful person like Niu Yu. When he met Wen Lanfeng in the Wen family's sacred land, even when Lanfeng couldn't see through it. Yet, he could. His cultivation could be imagined. No wonder he had the guts to mess around in the cultivation world. Without some ability, who would dare? He. Don't be nervous. I'm just saying casually. As for whether it's true or not, you and I both know it. There's no need to fight over it. Yu Qianchou shrugged indifferently and said, "Whether you make the entire cultivation world submit or not has nothing to do with me. Anyway, I'm alone. I won't fight for fame or profit with anyone. I'll just watch the show." Senior really likes to joke. Man Hu stepped forward and cupped his hands. "We still have something to do. Farewell, Senior." The few of them bowed to Yu Qianchou together. They all knew that it was not good to stay here for long. "Go ahead." Yu Qianchou raised his hand with an indifferent look. The few of them quickly left without saying anything. Yu Qianchou was still smiling. Guan Zhongkai couldn't help but ask with cupped hands. "Senior, what you said just now is true. What's true can't be false, and what's false can't be true. We'll naturally know in the future. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. That kid will sooner or later. TSK. Let's not talk about it. Yu Qianzhou suddenly frowned and said strangely, from the looks of these four experts at the end of the crossing calamity stage, it seems that Yan Zhuixing is very important to them. Their words and actions all revolve around him. Could it be that they already knew? Being reminded by him, the two of them were shocked. They suddenly remembered something that was known by all the forces. Everyone had been wondering why Bing Chengxi's side valued the Yan father and son so much. Especially towards Yan Zhuixing, the few disciples of Bing Chengxi almost never left his side. Guan Zhongkai revealed an expression of sudden realization. He cupped his hands and said impatiently, "Senior, I have something to do. I'll leave for a while. I'll be back soon." Yulan did the same. The two of them seemed to be afraid that Yu Qianzhou wouldn't agree. Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly and sighed. "I know what you want to do. Is there a need to do this? Why worry about it? Even if the sky falls, there will be someone taller to hold it up. Don't blame me for not reminding you. I just exposed Yan Zhuixing's background. Although they can't do anything to me, they won't be afraid of you. If you are by my side, they definitely won't dare to touch you. But once you leave me, they might kill you to silence you. Of course, if you have to go back to report, I suggest that you two stay together. It's safer to stay together." Yu Qianzhou was naturally afraid that something would happen to the two of them. If the two witnesses died and the words came out of Niu Yud's mouth, even if it was true, no one would believe it. That was why he didn't forget to remind them so that their efforts wouldn't go to waste. "Thank you for the reminder, Senior." The two of them bowed and thanked him. They looked at each other and nodded. Then, they rushed out of the back door of the restaurant. Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing. You haven't tasted the feeling of being hunted, right? I've already had my fill. You and I are enemies. How can we favor one and discriminate against the other? I'll let you have some fun too. Otherwise, I'll be sorry. I'll also watch the show. Yu Qianzhou muttered and revealed a wretched smile. He slowly walked to the door and took out a large ingot of gold. He threw it to the smiling shopkeeper and waved his hand. "Continue your business. I won't disturb you anymore." Chapter 578. But the shopkeeper was in a hurry to flatter Yu Qianzhou and refused to take money. What a joke. He was flattering a person who was more important than the princess. How could he accept money? If he could form a relationship with such a person, it would be more valuable than this ingot of gold. Yu Qianzhou glared at him coldly. The shopkeeper suddenly felt a chill and shivered in fear. He didn't dare to pester him anymore and watched the distinguished guest disappear into the street. Walking to a secluded alley and seeing no one around, Yu Qianzhou flashed into the air. After identifying the direction, he flew to the Lan City branch of the World Chamber of Commerce. The reason why he came to Lan City of Bai One country was to find a chance to see Wen Lanfeng and see what this guy who supported him meant. He didn't want to be sold out without knowing. He didn't expect to meet Nongzhu in advance. He was relieved to know that Wen Lanfeng didn't have any bad intentions. The problem he had to solve now was Yan Zhuixing. Since he met him, he had to take the opportunity to eliminate this guy to avoid future trouble. If he was Yan Zhuixing, he would definitely kill Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to silence them. After all, the odds of winning against 2 with 4 in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage was very high. Plus there was a strange guy like Yan Zhuixing, so the other party would definitely ambush on the way to the Lan City branch. Yu Qianzhou made up his mind. If Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were in danger, he would definitely think of a way to save them and let them spread the news, just as he expected. In a wilderness on the outskirts of Lan City, Man Hu and the others were discussing how to split into 2 groups to intercept and kill Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. But what made them depressed was that everyone thought that Guan Zhongkai would go to the Lan City branch of the World Chamber of Commerce to report. But what about Yulan? Where was the contact point of the Circe's kingdom? Where could they intercept and kill Yulan? There were only a few of them. They couldn't just scatter and search everywhere, right? As for Wenqing, who had the mind to care about her now? They had already dumped her. Damn it! Why did we miss this? What's the point of just killing Guan Zhongkai? The rest of Yulan can still spread the news. The seventh brother stomped his feet in frustration. Fifth brother looked at Man Hu and said, "Eldest brother, what do you think we should do?" Man Hu snorted coldly and said, "The Redbud Kingdom isn't far from the snowy mountains." Now that things had come to this, he had no choice but to contact his master and ask him to personally take action. He asked the old man to immediately rush to the Purple Thistle Kingdom and kill Shengguan Taiping and the others before they spread the news. He believed that with his master's cultivation, killing Shengguan Taiping would not be a problem. In this way, even if they get the news, dead people won't reveal secrets. Lao Wu clapped his hands and agreed, "That's right. Let's kill Shengguan Taiping and his men. I'm sure Yulan Du won't know about it for a while, so he won't spread the news. We'll definitely be able to find him easily. It's settled then. Fifth brother, sixth brother, go find Yulan Du immediately. I'll send a message to Master first, and then I'll go to the Orchid City branch with seventh brother. The World Commerce doesn't have any experts here, and Guan Zhongkai isn't my match. The two of us are enough to wipe out the Orchid City branch." Man Hu waved his hand and said, "Let's split up." Just as Lao Wu and Lao Lu were about to leave, they heard Yan Zhuixing, who had been frowning and pondering, shout, "Wait!" The four martial brothers all paused, and Man Hu asked doubtfully, "Young Palace Master, this matter shouldn't be delayed. What else do you have to say?" Yan Zhuixing shook his head and sighed, "Do you really think that Niu Yu just casually mentioned it and will really stay out of it? That's impossible. If I'm not mistaken, he purposely said those words for Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to hear. If he really wants to stay out of it, it's fine as long as he knows it. Why must he say it out loud? Maybe he really spilled the beans? This kind of thing isn't impossible." Lao Qi casually said. Man Hu raised his hand to signal him to shut up, frowned and said in a deep voice, "Young Palace Master is right. Niu Yu's last words are indeed fanning the flames." "Young Palace Master, what do you mean?" "I have a feeling that Niu Yu is purposely targeting me." Yan Zhuixing's eyes stared coldly in the direction of Lan City, gritted his teeth and said, "Since he deliberately wants Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to spread the news, how can he let us kill the two of them so easily? If I'm not wrong, he will definitely obstruct us. With his cultivation, which one of us can stop him? Furthermore, if we make a move, it will make it even more obvious that we have ulterior motives, and it will prove that we want to silence them. At that time, we won't even have a chance to redeem ourselves. With all the countries fighting together, how can Senior Bing withstand the joint attack of a few experts? What a vicious plan. What is this Niu Yu trying to do? We have no enmity with him." Lao Wu let out a breath of cold air. Lao Qi weakly asked, "Do you guys think that Master has some enmity with him? What's the point of saying this now?" Man Hu glared at him, then turned back and said, "Young Palace Master, do you have an idea?" "It can't be considered an idea. We can only try it as a last resort. At least there's a chance to recover our losses." Yan Zhuixing quickly analyzed to the others, "The only thing we need to do now is to immediately send a message to Senior Bing, so that he can be prepared. We have to return to Snowy Mountain as soon as possible before the news spreads. Otherwise, it won't be safe to stay anywhere. Once we have a foothold, we can accuse Niu Yu of spouting nonsense. After all, Niu Yu is a big liar, and everyone in the cultivation world knows that. In terms of credibility, we are better than him. In the end, it will depend on whose words are more trustworthy. This is our only chance." The others nodded slightly. Man Hu clapped his hands and said, "All right, it's decided. You guys bring young Palace Master and hurry on with the journey. After I send the message to Master, I will immediately rush over. There's no time to lose, let's go." In the blink of an eye, the four of them quickly flew into the sky. Man Hu was alone in the wilderness. He took out a handful of spirit stones, found the direction of Snowy Mountain, and used his unique voice transmission secret technique to send a message. Yu Qianzhou flew along the route from Lan City to the World Commerce Association's branch. Along the way, he didn't even see any signs of fighting, let alone hear any sounds of fighting. The Lan City branch was just ahead, so why wasn't there any reaction? Yu Qianzhou floated in the air, pinched his chin, and muttered to himself, "Strange, could it be that I made a mistake in my judgment? Or could Yan Zhuixing and the others bear the consequences of this news spreading? It can't be that awesome, right?" Logically speaking, the World Commerce Association is the most powerful and has the widest channels to spread the news. The first person they would kill should be Guan Zhongkai. Just as he was about to go to the Lan City branch to see if Guan Zhongkai was there, he heard someone shouting, "Senior Niu, why are you here?" Yu Qianzhou tilted his head and saw Guan Zhongkai and Yulan coming together, followed by more than 10 people. The group of people gathered in the air and bowed to him, "Senior Niu. No need to stand on ceremony." Yu Qianzhou raised his hand, suppressing the doubts in his heart, and asked Guan Zhongkai, "You've already sent the news back to the World Commerce Association's headquarters?" Guan Zhongkai rubbed his palms excitedly and said, "That's right, my master personally received the news. At the same time, my master also told this junior to thank senior, saying that if it wasn't for senior, we wouldn't have discovered such a major hidden danger." He was so excited because Sikongju praised him for doing well this time, saying that he would personally tell Grandmaster Yin Baikong. As for his previous mistakes, he wouldn't pursue it anymore, and his authority in the World Commerce Association was restored. What a joke, this authority wasn't simple. In terms of seniority, he was the number 4 person in the World Commerce Association. He was second only to his martial uncle Jing Yuankong. How could he not be happy? As a matter of fact, as soon as he regained his authority to mobilize manpower, he immediately mobilized the 15 experts of the branch here. Half of it was for Yulan to see, to tell him that he hadn't lost power in the World Commerce Association. The other half was to ensure Yulan's safety when he went to deliver the news. After all, he was also worried that Man Hu and the others would silence them. If an accident happened, with these people blocking, it would be enough for the 2 of them to escape. Don't thank me, this matter has nothing to do with me. You guys go do what you need to do." Yu Qianzhou politely and humbly brushed these people off. Watching the group of people disappear into the distance, he still had a stomach full of doubts and felt that something was wrong. After that, he arrived at the Lan City branch. The manager here also recognized him and immediately received him warmly. Yu Qianzhou let the manager do what he needed to and didn't need to care about him. Sitting in the inner hall and waiting for Guan Zhongkai to return, he frowned and thought about what went wrong. It shouldn't be like this. World Commerce Association Headquarters, Cornucopia God of Wealth Peak. After Sikongju received the news from his disciple, he immediately went to the Hall of Wealth at the top of the God of Wealth Peak and quickly informed the seated Yin Baikong of the news. "What? There's such a thing?" Yin Baikong opened his eyes and stood up. He stared at his eldest disciple and shouted, "Are you sure that this news is true? It shouldn't be false." Zhongkai saw it with his own eyes and heard it with his own ears. Sikongju explained, according to Zhongkai, Niuyud seems to know Nongzhu. After sending Nongzhu out of the restaurant, he accidentally saw Yan Zhuixing and asked him a few questions on the spot. Although Niuyud didn't take it seriously after asking, Zhongkai saw that Yan Zhuixing and the others became nervous and quickly left. Zhongkai felt that this was a serious matter and immediately returned to the Lan City branch to report this matter to me. Yin Baikong squinted his eyes and said, "You mean that Bing Chengxi's disciples know this secret?" This is only Zhong Kai's judgment based on the situation on the spot. This is because he noticed that when Niu Yud mentioned this matter, the expressions of Bing Chengxi's 4 disciples were obviously not right. Furthermore, it was Man Hu, the eldest disciple of Bing Chengxi, who first found an excuse to bring Yan Zhuixing away. Xikong Ju was speaking the truth. However, he didn't know that Guan Zhongkai had exaggerated the matter a lot in order to atone for his crimes. He even showed off his wisdom and martial prowess. Humph. Bing Chengxi, what the hell are you trying to do? Yin Baikong's expression turned sinister as he said in a deep voice, when everyone decided to replace the Yan father and son, Bing Chengxi even came to persuade me and Hu Changshou to protect them. At that time, I felt that it was strange. They were just 2 insignificant people and I couldn't figure it out. I almost forgot about it. Who would have thought that there was such a big secret? Bing Chengxi. Chapter 579. Xikong Ju sighed, speaking of which, we really have to thank that Niu Yud this time. If it wasn't for him seeing through us, we would still be in the dark. However, that Niu Yud is really powerful. I wonder how high his cultivation is. Let's put Niu Yud's matter aside. Who else knows about Yan Zhuixing? Yin Baikong asked. Shengguan Taiping's disciple, Yulandu, he was also at the scene and saw some clues. Right now, Zhongkai is escorting him to deliver the news. Xikong Ju replied. Fool. Yin Baikong scolded and immediately made arrangements, before the news spreads, immediately send an order to all the branches to search for Yan Zhuixing's whereabouts. We must find him before anyone else. You will personally oversee this matter. Once you find Yan Zhuixing, you must capture him alive. I want to see what kind of heaven-defying cultivation technique he's hiding. Xikong Ju was slightly startled. He immediately understood his master's meaning. He shouldn't have left Yulandu alive and let him deliver the news to Shengguan Taiping. How could such a heaven-defying cultivation technique fall into the hands of others? However, it was too late to regret now. A trace of regret flashed across Xikong Ju's face. He immediately cupped his hands and said, I'll go arrange it now. Just as he turned around, he heard his master say with a gratified tone, Your muddle-headed disciple, Guan Zhongkai, has done a good job. When he returns, I'll personally see him. Xikong Ju turned around and declined, Master is overpraising me. He made 2 mistakes previously, and this disciple has already thickened his face to protect him. This time, he's only atoning for his mistakes. How would I dare to let Master see him personally? Xikong Ju didn't report Guan Zhongkai's 2 mistakes to his master. Although it was within his authority, he didn't think that he could hide it from his master. Since it was already mentioned, he naturally had to make it clear. He was very clear about his master Yin Baikong's character. These words of praise were actually a test. If he didn't know about Guan Zhongkai's mistakes, then he would be an idiot. Yin Baikong gave a noncommittal, then. Xikong Ju sneaked a glance and saw that his master's expression had eased up quite a bit. He was even more certain that his master was just testing him. His back was already drenched in cold sweat. Yin Baikong waved his hand at him, and Xikong Ju quickly descended the mountain. The origin of the Redbud Kingdom's name was because there was a sea of redbud flowers that covered an area of several hundred miles in the kingdom. The people in the country liked to climb high mountains to see the endless sea of Chinese redbud flowers. The red and green colors were pleasing to the eye. However, they could only watch from afar and were not allowed to enter. Even the nobles were the same. This forbidden area had existed for many years. Although the imperial court had given strict orders, it was still too vast. It was impossible to send people to guard it. Thus, there were often people who wanted to sneak in to see what was going on, but those who entered usually never returned. Gradually, although this gorgeous sea of redbud flowers was pleasing to the eye, it also seemed somewhat strange, and no one dared to trespass. In the depths of the sea of redbud flowers, in a place that was difficult for outsiders to see, there was actually a stretch of magnificent buildings. Inside the main building, the Grand Redbud Flower Palace, the mid-soul formation cultivator Shangguan Taiping had just received a message from his disciple, Yulan Du. After recovering from his shock, he was now pacing back and forth alone in the hall, constantly muttering the three words, Yin Bai Kong. Of course, he wanted to obtain the peerless magic art that could dominate the world. However, this news had already fallen into Yin Bai Kong's hands. Although he was the second to know, he knew that with the World Commerce Association interfering, this piece of meat would not belong to him. Presumably, the World Commerce Association had already taken action. What worried him the most was that the Great Snow Mountain where Bing Chengzi, who was currently ranked third in the cultivation world, lived was not far from here. It was a neighboring country. If he interfered in this matter, Bing Chengzi might be the first to deal with him. This would not be fun. Although Bai Chongqun has the ability to dominate the cultivation world, he has never had such great ambitions. Now that everyone is living in peace, this is good. If the likes of Yin Bai Kong were to have such strength, I'm afraid there would be no place for me to stand. I didn't expect Bing Chengzi to be such an ambitious person. Shangguan Taiping folded his arms and laughed to himself, muttering, this matter must be known to the people of the world. Humph. Whoever wants to dominate the cultivation world has to ask the consent of the cultivators of the world. Finished speaking, he turned around and strode towards the rear hall. He had already made his decision. No matter how tempting this fruit was, he had to endure it. With his cultivation, there was no chance of him taking advantage of this opportunity. He had to spread this news as soon as possible, otherwise he might lose his life because of this news. Yin Bai Kong was not a good person. Man Hu and the others finally experienced the power of the World Commerce Association. Originally, with their cultivation, they would have reached the Great Snow Mountain in less than 3 days. However, after 3 days, they had only covered half of the distance. There was really no other way. Wherever there was a possibility of leading to the Great Snow Mountain, there were people from the World Commerce Association hiding everywhere. Along the way, they had already tried to be as low-key as possible. However, there were constantly people who disregarded their lives and forcefully obstructed them, as if they had received a death order. The 5 of them had already fought dozens of battles, killing at least 200 to 300 if not 400 to 500 enemies. Fortunately, with the cultivation of the 5 of them, they were able to grit their teeth and endure it, and nothing happened to them. Now that things had come to this, it was clear that the entire World Commerce Association had been mobilized. Once their whereabouts were exposed, there were more and more people intercepting them. The opponent's cultivation was also getting higher and higher. Among the people they encountered, the number of experts at the late tribulation passing stage was gradually increasing. This was not a good sign. In a dense forest, the 5 people were hiding. From their appearance, they seemed to be in a somewhat sorry state. Number 5, Number 6, and Number 7 stood in a triangle, vigilantly watching their surroundings. Yan Zhuixing, who was surrounded by the 3 of them, was sitting cross-legged. If one looked closely, they would discover that he was not actually sitting on the ground. He was still a few inches off the ground, floating up and down slightly with his eyes closed. 7 poisonous snake-like black fiendish auras were swimming around his body. Within each black fiendish aura, there was a faintly discernible blood light flashing, appearing exceptionally strange. At the side, Man Hu's expression was solemn as he carefully guarded Yan Zhuixing, like a personal bodyguard. In the past few days of battle, they had continuously killed several late tribulation passing stage experts. To others, it was not a big deal if they could kill him. But to Yan Zhuixing, who cultivated demonic arts, a late tribulation passing stage nascent soul was an excellent tonic. None of the nascent souls he had devoured before had such a high cultivation. Including the 6 late tribulation passing stage experts, Yan Zhuixing had already devoured the nascent souls of more than 10 tribulation passing stage experts in 2 days. Man Hu and the others were the first to see this bloody scene of devouring. They were somewhat shocked, but they were already numb to it and did not find it strange. But what was worse was that eating too much tonic was not a good thing. If it was any other time, they would naturally be eager. But at this critical moment when they were escaping, Yan Zhuixing suddenly discovered that it was time for his demonic eyes to make a breakthrough. The opening chapter of the demonic book said, "Follow one's nature and become a demon." Once the opportunity arrives, one will immediately become a demon. The general meaning was that cultivating the demonic book was about following one's nature. If there was an opportunity to make a breakthrough, one must seize it and not miss it. Once the opportunity was missed, it would be wasted. Yan Zhuixing naturally could not miss such a good opportunity. It should be known that every inch of progress in the demonic book would bring him unimaginable benefits. So at this critical moment, he still decided to make a breakthrough. And Man Hu and the others had nothing to say, they could only do their best to help. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. A series of high-speed flying sounds swept past the top. The few of them immediately held their breaths. After the sounds faded, they saw old Seven, who was staring at the gaps between the leaves above, angrily say, "It's Ouyang Da's people from the great Liao nation." They also interfered. "This is expected. I have already contacted Master again and informed him of the situation. Master has already set off from the Great Snow Mountain to pick us up. Don't say too much and be careful." Man Hu said calmly. The other three's faces were filled with joy. Master had personally made a move. They suddenly felt a lot more confident. With Master's cultivation, it would take at most half a day to get here. On the first day, everyone only met people from the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce. They did not see any other forces interfering. The few of them thought that Yin Baikong wanted to monopolize the demonic book and purposely controlled the spread of the news. This was a good thing for them, who were escaping. After all, no matter how big the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce was, it was still limited. However, before the second day arrived, they discovered that outstanding heroes were everywhere. There were people flying everywhere to search for them, forcing them to hide in all directions. If Yu Qianzhou knew about this, he would definitely laugh very happily. Back then, he was forced into the misty forest by people like this. Now that he could let Yan Zhuixing have a taste of this, how could he not be happy? The 7 black fiends that were circling around Yan Zhuixing suddenly moved faster. The 4 of them looked over and saw Yan Zhuixing's chest suddenly expand. He took a deep breath and the 7 black fiends entered his nostrils in a blink of an eye. Then, his eyes moved slightly. Just as he opened his eyes, they saw a red glow that seemed to be overflowing. When he opened his eyes, the red glow overflowed and completely covered his eyes. Man Hu and the other 3 stared at his eyes and felt like their souls were captivated. They felt like they couldn't control themselves. Just as the 4 of them were shocked, the red glow quickly disappeared. Yan Zhuixing's eyes had already returned to normal. They were still pitch black. The 4 of them also calmed their minds in an instant. However, they still looked at each other with lingering fear. Man Hu asked softly, "Young Palace Master, have you already broken through?" "I have already cultivated to the realm of demon eye ecstasy," Yan Zhuixing said with a cold expression. The few of them revealed expressions of joy. They did not find his cold reaction strange at all. This was because every time he cultivated, he would have this reaction. Everyone was already used to it. Unbeknownst to them, when Yan Zhuixing's demon eye was shining with red light, there was an early-stage tribulation passing cultivator hovering in the sky. As he scanned the dense forest, he suddenly discovered a red light flashing through the gaps in the forest. It immediately aroused his vigilance, and he stealthily came over here. Chapter 580. At this time, Yu Qianchou had already left Lan City with Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan had both made great contributions and received praise from their master. They were naturally in a good mood and were even more respectful towards Niu Yud. But what made the two more depressed was that this Niu Yud was still half dead on the road. He clearly had such a high level of cultivation, but he refused to speed up. Instead, he continued to fly on a broken flying sword. What was worse was that he kept stopping along the way. It was no different from a sightseeing tour. So Guan Zhongkai said weakly, "Senior Niu, if we keep going like this, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach the World Chamber of Commerce by the time the cornucopia gathering starts." Unexpectedly, Niu Yud raised his eyebrows and said, "What? You think I'm flying too slow? If I fly too fast and you lose me, and I can't find the way to the World Chamber of Commerce, don't blame me for not keeping my word after taking the money." Yulan secretly smiled. He didn't care. He actually wanted Niu Yud to slow down. It was best if he didn't go to the World Chamber of Commerce. No, I was wrong. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly blocked in front of him and smiled apologetically. Walk slowly, no rush, no rush. If he really lost Niu Yud, the consequences were not something he could bear. If he was slow, then so be it. At least he could push the blame onto Niu Yud when it was late. It had nothing to do with him. Humph. Niu Yud gave him an unhappy look. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't want to fly fast, but his cultivation was only so high. No matter how fast he went, he couldn't go very fast. In the end, because of these few words, "Fine." This Niu Yud simply had Yulan by 3 horses and rode them slowly on the ground. He could walk dozens of li in a day. Yulan was naturally happy to cooperate. Guan Zhongkai was about to cry. He was just short of calling him ancestor. "I told you to slow down, but not this slow method. How long would it take to reach the World Chamber of Commerce? If he was this slow, it would be strange if he was fine. He would definitely be taught a lesson when he returned." So Guan Zhongkai tried to persuade him with kind words, but Niu Yud only said that he was tired of flying and didn't want to fly anymore. In the end, the former begged for a long time before agreeing to his method of using a flying artifact. Sitting on the flying Dharma artifact, Yu Qianchou was carefree, but he did not stop. Every once in a while, he would force the two of them to inquire about Yan Zhuixing, to see if he had been captured. Fortunately, this was not a difficult matter for Guan Zhongkai. With the World Chamber of Commerce's information network in various countries, it was very easy for him to obtain the latest news. In this large area of space, there was a person observing every 1 kilometer, because Yan Zhuixing and the other 4 had disappeared within this area. He was just one of them. However, coincidentally, Yan Zhuixing and the others who were being apprehended were right below him. He did not know if this was his opportunity to render meritorious service or his misfortune. A sky-shaking sound arrow was quietly held in his hand. If there really was a target down there, he wouldn't need to risk his life. As long as he sent a signal, he would have made a great contribution. After that, a large number of experts would gather here. If he captured Yan Zhuixing, his contribution would be even greater. Silently and gently, he approached the dense forest below. However, the vegetation in this forest was really dense. He had already reached the treetops, but he couldn't see the scene below clearly. He stretched his head left and right, trying to see what was happening below through the gaps between the branches and leaves without alerting his target. However, he was in the light, and the area covered by the towering trees was very dark. This was how people's visual reaction was. It was difficult to see anything in the dark from the light, but it was very clear from the light from the dark. He had clearly seen a red light flash before, and he was definitely not seeing things. However, there was no movement at all now. Without a choice, he tightened his grip on the sky-shaking sound arrow in his hand, ready to send a signal at any time. His body tried to avoid rubbing against the branches and leaves as he slowly descended. Although the movement from touching the branches and leaves was very small, what were the cultivations of Man Hu and the others? They were much taller than him, and in addition, they were constantly on guard, so they immediately sensed the faint movement. The four of them looked up at the top of Yan Zhuixing's head at the same time. Yan Zhuixing's cultivation was not as good as the four of them, so he did not notice anything at first. However, the four of them's actions undoubtedly indicated something. He slowly raised his head and looked up. The light from the branches and leaves was flickering, and he could vaguely see a person diving down. The seventh brother had a fierce expression as he prepared to kill him. Man Hu quickly signaled his three juniors to not act blindly without thinking, and transmitted his voice, "Everyone hide well, he has a whistling arrow in his hand. Wait for him to come down before making a move. Don't give him a chance to send a signal." The four of them quietly hid behind a big tree, ready to launch a sneak attack. However, they discovered that Yan Zhuixing slowly stood up in the air, and did not have the slightest intention of hiding. Man Hu anxiously transmitted his voice, "Young palace master, don't beat the grass and alert the snake, don't worry, I just wanted to test the power of the demon eye ecstasy." Yan Zhuixing raised his head and looked up, just in time. Just as he finished speaking, his eyes suddenly blossomed with a demonic red light. The cultivator who had dived down had mixed into the shade of the trees, and had gradually adapted to the darkness below. Stealthily pushing aside the last eyesore in front of him, he focused his gaze and looked down. What surprised him was that there seemed to be someone looking at him from below. From the light that leaked out, he could see the glimmer in the other party's eyes. In that instant, the pair of ice-cold eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic and breathtaking red light. It reflected directly into his eyes, and then he couldn't see anything, only his eyes were filled with red. His consciousness instantly fell into a coma, and when he suddenly woke up, he discovered that he was in a boundless sea of blood. Panic, fear, and he wanted to shout loudly, and he wanted to struggle with all his might. However, he discovered that he could not shout, and his limbs were so heavy that he could not even move a finger. At this moment, a light suddenly appeared in the distant sea of blood, and it seemed to be an escape route. "Come over, come over, come over." In the direction of the exit, there were people constantly calling out to him, and then he involuntarily floated over. Man Hu and the other three stared nervously in this direction. Once the other party sent out a signal, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was not like before. At that time, it was only the World Commerce Association that was chasing, but now, all the powers had come to join in the fun. Yan Zhuixing's demonic eye activated, and when the red light lit up, the four of them felt their minds ripple. Fortunately, it was not targeted at the four of them, so it did not affect them much. Yan Zhuixing stretched out his hand towards the person hiding behind the tree, and softly called out, "Come over." The voice was like a sleep-talking murmur, like a mother calling her naughty son home for dinner, harmless and warm. As for the person behind the tree, he pushed aside the tree branches, and slowly floated towards Yan Zhuixing with a dazed look in his eyes. He was still holding the sky-shaking sound arrow in his hand, but it did not have any effect. Instead, he stiffly loosened his fingers, and the arrow fell onto the thick layer of leaves. The red light in Yan Zhuixing's eyes had already disappeared, and his eyes had turned into an abnormally terrifying blood-red color. It made one's scalp tingle, and it did not look like a human's eyes. That cultivator quietly floated in front of Yan Zhuixing, and with a silly smile, he stared at that pair of blood-red eyes. Yan Zhuixing stretched out his hand, and gently stroked his face. His movements were very gentle. Just as the smile on that cultivator's face grew wider, the blood red in Yan Zhuixing's eyes faded, and he regained his cold and emotionless look. That cultivator immediately became confused, as if he could not find his way. Man Hu and the other three were no longer affected when Yan Zhuixing withdrew the red light in his eyes. But they still stared dumbfoundedly at this abnormally strange scene. Suddenly, Yan Zhuixing's hand that was caressing the other party changed from gentle to sinister 5 claws. With a lingering killing intent, it pierced into the lower half of the other party's face with a crack. From the nose to the entire chin, it was completely wrapped in this claw. Fresh blood flowed out uncontrollably. That cultivator felt the pain, and his eyes instantly regained clarity. Then, they bulged out, filled with disbelief. Struggle, but with half of his face being grabbed, how could he struggle free? The more he struggled, the more pain he felt. He could not even make a sound of pain or cry for help. His nose and mouth were grabbed by the other party, so how could he make a sound? Gotcha, half of his face was crushed together, and a bloody hole appeared on the lower half of his face. The breath exhaled from the bloody hole blew out a blood bubble, and with a "pu," it burst. That person almost fainted from the pain, and lost control of his body. Just as he was about to fall, Yan Zhuixing expressionlessly clenched his 5 claws into a fist, and lightly shouted, "Little devil fist." A fist imprinted on the other party's chest. Bang! The sound was not too loud, and it was only a muffled sound. Obviously, the strength was controlled perfectly. However, that cultivator exploded into pieces in an instant, and blood rained down on the ground. Yan Zhuixing, who was floating in the forest, expressionlessly shook off the blood on his hand. The strange thing was that his hand did not seem to be stained with blood. He just shook it, and there was not even a trace of blood on his hand. He glanced at the direction where the 4 of them were hiding, and as if nothing had happened, he said, "State Preceptor, let us continue on our way." The 4 of them walked out silently, and looked at the scattered red on the ground. They were still in a daze. They did not expect the Devil Eye to be so powerful, to be able to directly control people. It was a little too scary. First it was the Devil Eye, then the Devil Claw, and finally the Little Devil Fist, which easily solved the problem. The 4 of them thought back to that scene. If it was used on them, they did not know if they could block it. Just thinking about it made them feel a chill down their spines. OL-6 picked up the sky-shaking arrow, and put it in his storage bag. Man Who laughed bitterly, and waved his hand, "Let's go. Fly close to the ground in the forest. Although the speed is much slower, at least it is safer. I hope I can meet Master soon." After saying that, he identified the direction and flew away. The 4 of them followed closely behind him. The 5 of them fluttered in the forest, avoiding the trees in front of them. Looking at Yan Zhuixing's flying speed, he was actually not any slower than them, but there was a layer of black light wrapped around his body. This was the flying movement technique from the demonic book, Devil Light Glimpse. Otherwise, with his cultivation, there would be a big gap if he wanted to keep up with the speed of the 4 of them. Chapter 581. That's strange. Where did this Niuyud come from? Why haven't I heard of him before? In the sacred palace of Baiwan Nation, when Lanfeng had an incredulous look on his face as he sat in the palace carved from jade. After the news about Yan Zhuixing came out, when Lanfeng was also shocked. However, he was not interested in robbing others. Instead, he found it unbelievable that Niuyud could see through Yan Zhuixing's background. He was the young man that Bing Qingzi brought with him some time ago. At that time, when Lanfeng was a little surprised and couldn't help but take a few more glances. He didn't pay much attention to him when he found that he was just a small cultivator in the early stage of passing calamity. However, Niuyud could see something else. Could it be that his cultivation was higher than his? He was disdainful of Niuyud's actions in the ghost village. He thought that Niuyud was at most a liar with a decent cultivation. He didn't expect him to be so capable. Nongzhu sat on the side and peeled the green fragrant seed, speechlessly. It was a kind of hard-shelled nut the size of a fingernail. After opening it, there was white and plump flesh inside, which tasted very fragrant and delicious. This kind of nut could only be found in the sacred land of the Wen family. It couldn't grow anywhere else. Although the nut was hard, with Nongzhu's cultivation, it was easily opened with a light pinch. The white flesh popped into her mouth. He sat on the chair and chewed. Looking at Wen Lanfeng, who was frowning and thinking, he didn't know what to say. He didn't expect it either. He didn't agree to help Yu Qianzhou kill Yan Zhuixing. In the end, as soon as he left the restaurant, Yu Qianzhou killed Yan Zhuixing. This kid really did what he said he would do. He didn't hesitate at all. But wasn't the commotion a little too big? They were trying to kill Yan Zhuixing. What kind of magic art could dominate the cultivation world? Was it so mysterious? Ruthless. He didn't do it himself, but let all the cultivators in the world do it together. Nongzhu. I'm impressed. It's said that you are very popular in the cultivation world. I didn't expect you to know this Niu Yud who appeared out of nowhere. You really have a wide circle of friends. Can you tell me who this person is? Wen Lanfeng asked with a smile. Nongzhu knew that she couldn't hide the fact that she met Niu Yud in his territory. She shook her head and said, "Old one. Who cares where he came from? It's not like he's in your way. What are you worrying about? You can't say that. I have a favor to ask from him. I want you to help me build a bridge," Wen Lanfeng said seriously. Nongzhu's expression froze. She asked suspiciously, "Do you have a favor to ask of him? Beg him for what?" Limit-breaking pill. Wen Lanfeng sighed and said, "I shouldn't be so greedy, but I can't always protect the entire Wen family. There will come a day when I have to leave." He had to make some plans for the Wen family. "Can you ask him to sell me some restriction-breaking pills? I'll pay him back." Nongzhu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What limit-breaking pill? Who knows if it's a poison or a panacea? In short, it's a scam. Why do you have to give him money? She paused and said with a wry smile, "Listen to me. Anyway, as long as it's something made by Niu Yud, you'd better not touch it. It's not as good as you think." "Is it fake?" Wen Lanfeng was shocked. Nongzhu waved her hand and said, "I don't know whether it's fake or not. Anyway, I advise you to restrain your Wen family. Don't get involved in Niu Yud's business. There are only benefits. You just need to watch the fun from the sidelines. By the way, just keep it to yourself. Don't let anyone else know about it." The meaning was very clear. Wen Lanfeng would be an idiot if he still didn't understand. He nodded slightly and said, "Thank you. Alas. I'm going back to Shantian Island. The sound transmission formation left by Nanming is still there. Keep in touch." Nongzhu said and left the temple, disappearing into the horizon. Yan Zhuixing and the others didn't know what the consequences of killing that cultivator would be. In fact, that cultivator was an observation point in this area. He was constantly in contact with people in other directions. It was equivalent to laying a net in this area. When the people in other observation points discovered that the person in this observation point had lost contact, they immediately spread the news. Not long after Man Hu and the others left, 40 to 50 cultivators above tribulation passing stage gathered from all directions. They were all disciples of the world commerce. After looking around, their attention immediately focused on the dense forest below. The person in the lead was Sikong Ju's fifth disciple, Zhang Zuansheng. "Search below." Zhang Zuansheng waved his hand without hesitation. Dozens of people rushed into the forest below and found a dismembered corpse on the spot. A few disciples who were good at tracking quickly searched the area and soon found some clues. One of them reported to Zhang Zuansheng, "Martial uncle, from the scene, there are 5 different people's footprints. The number matches with Yan Zhuixing's. It should be done by Yan Zhuixing and the others." Zhang Zuansheng looked around and saw that the ground was covered in thick leaves. It didn't look like a place to leave footprints. He asked suspiciously, "How can you be sure it's them?" The disciple cupped his hands and said, "It's hard to be sure. But when they killed our disciples, they shouldn't have exploded the corpses and scattered the blood everywhere. That's why they left footprints. Saying that, he raised a leaf with a bloody footprint and continued to explain, this was obviously left after they killed someone. Moreover, some of these footprints have one thing in common. When they left, they all headed in the same direction. He waved his hand and pointed southwest, over there. They went along this mountain range. Zhang Zuansheng nodded slightly. Southwest was where Di Rong Kingdom went. The two matched, so he made a prompt decision, the opponents are hiding in the forest and fleeing. Inform the people in the southwest to set up an ambush in the forest in front. We'll spread out and search southwest. They won't be able to escape. Remember, when you find someone, send the signal first. Under his command, 2 people flew into the sky to report. The other dozens of people formed a search line of nearly 1,000 meters and swept southwest. The movements of the World Commerce Association immediately attracted the attention of the other powers who were confused. Therefore, the direction of this mountain range immediately became the direction where the powers of the various countries gathered. People constantly entered the forest to search and the sky was filled with people, almost forming an inescapable net. Man Hu and the other 4 who were fleeing clearly felt the pressure. They could see people in the sky almost constantly when they raised their heads. Moreover, people would occasionally enter the forest to search from all directions. This made it even harder for them to speed up and they had to constantly hide and run. It was very obvious that the people chasing them had already discovered their precise route. Otherwise, it would not be so obvious in such a large mountain range. They never would have thought that it was because of Yan Zhuixing's little devil fist exploding corpse that caused this disaster. With this torment, the 5 of them immediately felt miserable. From the looks of it, they might not be able to escape. The 5 of them were currently hiding in a concave wall at the bottom of a small hill. The hanging vines had concealed them, but this was only a temporary camouflage and could not last long. Old 7 asked somewhat anxiously, eldest senior brother, what do we do? Man Hu shook his head and said with a bitter smile, what else can we do? If we really can't do it, we can only forcefully break out. Young Palace Master, do you have any ideas? The few of them looked at Yan Zhuixing together, hoping that he would have a good idea. Yan Zhuixing's face was cold as he suddenly gritted his teeth and said, Niu Yud, I have no enmity with you. Why do you want to harm me? The few of them revealed a trace of helplessness when they heard this. His words undoubtedly meant that he had no idea either. But who knew that they would hear him say, I'll forcefully break out. You guys stay here. Their target is me. They won't do anything to you. The few of them were greatly shocked and said almost in unison, no. Yan Zhuixing waved his hand at them and said coldly, don't worry. If there aren't any soul formation experts, they might not be able to stop me. If I can escape, I'll naturally go to Snowy Mountain to find you guys. No. Man Hu firmly denied, all the forces are mobilizing on a large scale. It's impossible that there aren't any soul formation experts among them. It's too risky. I have an idea. Old 6 suddenly said. The few of them looked at him and Old 7 said excitedly, 6th senior brother, what idea do you have? Quickly say it. Old 6 glanced at them and silently took out the sky-shaking whistle arrow from his storage bag. He said in a deep voice, you guys continue to move forward secretly. I'll go in the opposite direction. I'll try my best to hold on for 2 hours and increase the distance between us. When the time comes, I'll release this whistle arrow and it will definitely attract everyone. When the time comes, you guys take the opportunity to quickly leave. The few of them looked at Old 6 in shock. He clearly wanted to sacrifice himself to attract the enemy so that they could escape. Imagine, if thousands of people found out that they were fooled by him, even if it was Yan Zhuixing, who would let him go? No. Man Hu covered Old 7's mouth with his hand before he could even shout out. They could only hear the whooshing sound of people passing by above their heads. The few of them gritted their teeth and stared at Old 6. Even Yan Zhuixing, who was usually calm, was moved when he looked at him. When there was no more movement, Man Hu extended his hand to Old Six and said, "Give me the whistle arrow." Old Six shook his head and hugged the whistle arrow tightly. He chuckled and said, "I'm still hoping that eldest senior brother will avenge me. Leave this matter to me." "Right, eldest senior brother, remember to take revenge for second senior brother. Give it to me. You're the senior brother. This kind of matter should be done by me, the junior brother." Old Seven stretched out his hand to snatch it. "You guys leave quickly." Old Six pushed Old Seven's hand away. As he spoke, he also flashed out and sneaked in the direction he came from. Old Six. Sixth junior brother. Sixth senior brother. The few of them anxiously shouted in a low voice and did not dare to raise their voices. However, even if Old Six heard them, he did not turn around and disappeared into the dense forest. The three of them silently lowered their heads with bloodshot eyes. Yan Zhuixing tightly shut his mouth and his chest rapidly heaved up and down. Man Hu suddenly waved his hand and said, "Go, don't waste Old Six's painstaking efforts." Out of the original 5 people, only 4 were left. The 4 figures quickly dashed into the forest. Chapter 582. High up in the sky, a white shadow flew out of the D-Rome Kingdom's territory at an incredible speed and entered the Purple Thistle Kingdom's airspace. This person was none other than Bing Chengzi. Following closely behind it was a white line that flung its tail in flight. It was the Great Snow Mountain's guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon. At this moment, Bing Chengzi was burning with anxiety. After receiving the urgent situation report from his disciple, Man Hu, he did not stop and immediately set off from the Great Snow Mountain. Even the Snow Flood Dragon that had not left the Great Snow Mountain for thousands of years was brought down the mountain by him. He knew what the current situation was like. Even Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou, who were on his side, would fall out with him. His Great Snow Mountain lineage was not strong. Apart from him, only a few of his disciples had a higher cultivation. Furthermore, the guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon, was comparable to a mid-divine transformation realm cultivator. Now that things had come to this, he could only save Yan Zhuixing at all costs. If he did not try his best to save Yan Zhuixing, the curse on his body would not spare him. Even if he could abandon himself, he couldn't abandon his disciples. They were as close as father and son. Originally, the Snow Flood Dragon's cultivation could not keep up with Bing Chengzi's flying speed. However, the Snow Flood Dragon was born with the ability to ride the wind and break the waves. It already had the basic attributes of a dragon. It was born with speed. Although the Snow Flood Dragon could not speak, it had already gained intelligence and could feel its master's anxiety. Otherwise, he would not have brought it down the mountain and flown so frantically. On the other side of the Purple Thistle Kingdom, there was a mountain range. However, on this desolate mountain range, there were currently hundreds of people standing. Each of them stopped on the treetops, waiting for something. These people were all divine transformation realm lords of various kingdoms. They were not waiting for others, but for Bing Chengzi, who might pass by. There was a large-scale search going on ahead. Some people would definitely not allow Bing Chengzi to go over and interrupt them. For example, Yin Baikong, who had a calm expression. Yin Baikong squinted his eyes and glanced at Shengguan Taiping, who was on the treetops in the distance, with a somewhat resentful expression. Needless to say, who else but Shengguan Taiping could have spread the news to the whole world? This was equivalent to ruining his plans. Actually, he had wanted to leave first and kill Shengguan Taiping in the Purple Thistle Kingdom to prevent the news from leaking out. Who would have thought that Shengguan Taiping would be so cunning as to spread the news in advance? Soon after, it was rumored that the lords of the various kingdoms were moving out. Yin Baikong naturally couldn't sit still. He was very confident in his forces, but no matter how strong they were they wouldn't be able to defend against so many soul formation stage cultivators. He was forced to personally come out to hold the line for the World Commerce Association. From time to time, a group of experts from the cultivation world looked around. He was afraid that those two people would appear. One was Bai Changchun of the Demon Domain and the other was Wen Lanfeng of the Bai Wan Nation. If these two people were to come, some people's dreams would be shattered. In fact, there were many people who were eager for the two top experts of the cultivation world to appear because it was unlikely for them to get Yan Zhuixing. It would be better to let Yan Zhuixing fall into the hands of Bai Changchun and Wen Lanfeng so that everyone would be at ease. However, the two of them had yet to appear. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. This was an expert who truly had confidence in his own strength. They weren't interested in dominating the cultivation world at all and only believed in themselves. Now that things had come to this, many people had already secretly passed down orders to kill Yan Zhuixing on the spot if they found him. It would be best if their bones were ground to ashes, but their corpses couldn't fall into the hands of others. In any case, even if they got their hands on it, they would probably be attacked by others. Since they couldn't enjoy it, they might as well destroy it and maintain the status quo. Sikongju looked at his master's gloomy face and knew that he was in the wrong. When he received the news, he should have immediately asked Guan Zhongkai to kill Yulan at all costs. There wouldn't have been such trouble then. Now, even if the World Commerce Association got their hands on it, they would probably have to pay a huge price. A figure flew over from afar. After Mu Lianqiu bowed to Yin Baikong and his master, he transmitted his voice, "Grandmaster, Master, our people have found traces of Yan Zhuixing and the others. However, there are too many forces following us. I'm afraid that even if we find Yan Zhuixing, it will be a little troublesome." Yin Baikong transmitted his voice expressionlessly, "Those who are scattered, gather your strength. Lianqiu, go and pass down my decree. Inform all the branches to gather all the cultivators above tribulation passing stage to reinforce them. Sikong, go and hold the scene. Don't show mercy to anyone who dares to snatch it. Kill without mercy. I'll take care of everything." Yin Baikong was ruthless this time. How could he let others snatch the meat that was already in his hands? The two received the order and Mu Lianqiu rushed down the mountain to inform all the branches. Sikongju quickly flew in the direction of the search. The moment Sikongju moved, it became lively. There were many people watching this place. Almost 100 spirit-severing experts flew up and chased after Sikongju. This made Yin Baikong's teeth itch, but there was nothing he could do. He didn't have the ability to tell everyone not to move. Even if he spoke, they wouldn't listen to him. He wasn't Bai Changchun. Stone Jade City, the capital of Axi country. A banquet was already prepared in the guest hall of the World Commerce Association's Stone Jade City branch. Niu Yud, who was sitting at the head of the table, was eating and drinking to his heart's content. Yulan Do was in a good mood and happily poured wine for Niu Yud. Yulan Do was in a good mood and happily poured wine for Niu Yud. She didn't need to worry and just followed Niu Yud closely. Anyway, Guan Zhongkai would report the latest news later. It was really good to be able to keep up with the latest news of the cultivation world while having fun. As the two were eating and drinking, they suddenly heard the sound of dozens of people flying in the sky. They seemed to be in a hurry and from the sound, their cultivations weren't bad. The two looked at each other in shock and didn't know what happened. At this moment, Guan Zhongkai walked in quickly and said excitedly, "Senior Niu, I found it. I found Yan Zhuixing's tracks." Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. He put down the pig trotter in his hand and asked hurriedly, "Did you catch him or kill him?" Guan Zhongkai sat down and shook his head. "Not yet, but it should be soon. Since we found his tracks, it shouldn't be long before we catch him." "That's true." Yu Qianzhou chuckled and continued to eat the pig trotter. He thought that with so many people making a move, it would be difficult to catch him alive. He was afraid that many people would rather kill Yan Zhuixing than let him fall into the hands of others. Yulan Do asked casually, "Brother Guan, what happened outside just now?" "It seems that many cultivators above the tribulation passing stage left." "Did something happen?" How could Guan Zhongkai reveal this matter? This was a decree from his grandmaster to gather people. He shook his head nonchalantly and said, "It's nothing. Some blind people came to this branch and the manager went to gather people to support them. It's not a big deal." Yulan Do said, "Oh." She was more or less confused. The three continued to eat the dishes on the table. In the dense forest, Zhang Zuansheng originally led dozens of people to search, but later, many people came to help. At this moment, there were hundreds of people advancing in the forest. Even the sky above the forest was followed by a group of people. There were 6 people at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Old Six hid in a call not far away and quietly observed the movement in front of him. He originally planned to find a way to get further away and then release the whistling arrow. However, with such a dense group of people searching in front of him, there was no way to get past them. Counting the time, only an hour had passed. There was still nearly half of the time until the 2-hour deadline. Needless to say, looking at the situation here, eldest senior brother and the others weren't any better. With a bitter smile, Old Six took out the whistling arrow and retreated into the kernel, gritting his teeth. He raised the whistling arrow, found an opening above, and directly pulled it. Chirp. An ear-piercing sound rang out. A dazzling blue light rapidly rose from the forest into the sky. With a loud bang, a cloud of blue smoke exploded. It was like a blue mushroom cloud with a long trail below it, indicating where it came from. If it was at night, this mushroom cloud would emit a blue light to guide the way. The entire region was thrown into chaos. Everyone's eyes looked at the blue mushroom cloud. Someone took the lead and shouted, "The World Commerce Association has found the target. Charge over. Speed up, hurry. We can't let Yan Zhuixing fall into someone else's hands. Charge. Quickly go and support him." Shouts rang out everywhere. Everyone went crazy. There was no other way. Everyone had received a death order. In an instant, countless people swarmed in from all directions. The people who were searching in the forest in the distance all came out to check the direction and flocked in the direction of the blue mushroom cloud. Zhang Zuansheng and the others who were searching were all stunned when they saw a blue light rising not far away. Someone said in shock, "Someone found Yan Zhuixing in front?" This was the sky-shaking whistling arrow that only sounded when the target was found. Then, everyone saw a figure quickly flash to the left. Zhang Zuansheng shouted, "Catch him." Hundreds of people immediately chased after him. Looking down from the sky, the movements of these hundreds of people stirred up the forest. Bang was followed by a few screams. A few large trees fell down. It was already open. Some people who were watching from the sidelines, worried that it was a diversion, could no longer hold it in. The other side had clearly found the target. Both sides had already started fighting, so there was nothing to hesitate about. Therefore, they rushed over as fast as they could without any regard for their lives. The chaotic crowd rushed into the forest one after another. Just as the whistling arrow sounded out, Man Hu and the other 3 who were fleeing came to a stop with a jolt. Old Seven turned to look behind him and said with tears streaming down his face, "Sixth senior brother, didn't we agree on 2 hours? We haven't arrived yet. Hide." Man Hu, who also had tears streaming down his face, pulled him. The 4 quickly hid in a small cave. It was a very shallow and narrow cave. The 4 of them were tightly squeezed together. 3 out of the 4 people were crying silently. Yan Zhuixing's lips were tightly shut, and his face was stretched taut. Chapter 583. In his impression, other than a bit of affection between family members, there was no friendship between other relationships. In the cultivation world, most people used each other. Ever since he started cultivating devil skills, he had become more and more selfish. His personality had gradually become cold and he didn't believe in these things. However, what happened today had given him too much shock. Especially the heroic act of Old Six sacrificing himself to lure the enemy, it made his cold heart's blood boil. In this sect, although they weren't father and son, they were better than real father and son. Although they weren't brothers, they were better than real brothers. It was rare to see someone risking their life for a brother. It stirred people's hearts. The cruel sounds of fighting in the distance were intense. It was unknown how many people Old Six was facing right now. The straightforward Old Seven looked like a careless boorish person, but at this moment, he was crying like a child and tightly covering his mouth. Old Five closed his eyes and forcefully pressed the back of his head against the soil. Tears silently slid down his face. Man who had already bitten his lips until they bled. Hearing the movements outside, Yan Juixing looked at the three martial brothers and pursed his lips into a line. The muscles on his face twitched and he almost couldn't control his emotions. This kind of situation had never happened before, not to mention after cultivating demonic arts. Whoosh whoosh. Another wave of fast-flying sound swept past above their heads. Then there was no more movement. Only the sounds of fighting came from the distance. This was probably the last wave. Those who should go had all gone. From today onwards, Old Two and Old Six's grudge is my grudge. Yan Juixing's words jumped out one by one. His eyes were abnormally cold. If we don't leave now, when will we? Man who shouted in a low voice and decisively pushed the others out. The four of them quickly fled. The area below where the whistling arrows had come from had already been thrown into chaos. In just a few moments, several thousand people had charged over and rushed into the forest below like a swarm of bees. That scene was very lively. A large patch of the towering ancient trees had already fallen. Eldest martial uncle, stop the people from world commerce. Block the others for me. It's me. Watch carefully before you act. One side didn't want to let the other side take the lead, while the other side wanted to be first. The people who arrived first immediately helped out. The people who came later did not understand the situation at all. When they heard their fellow disciples calling out to them, they did not hesitate to help out. As a result, the battle became more and more intense. It had already become a chaotic battle. Seeing their fellow disciples fall one by one, everyone's eyes turned red with killing intent. As long as someone brushed past him, he would only recognize the clothes and not the person. Letting go would be a killing move. The most unlucky ones were the people from the World Commerce Association. Although they had a lot of people, they were besieged by the various powers. Because World Commerce had taken the initiative to stop the others, when those people's fellow sect members rushed over and saw their own people fighting with World Commerce, they didn't know who Yan Juixing was and thought that World Commerce had already captured him. They had come here to snatch people, so there was no need for words. Fight. When the other powers rushed over and saw that almost everyone was attacking World Commerce, they also thought that World Commerce had succeeded. Everyone is fighting for people, let's fight for them too. Fight. Those who came later saw that their fellow disciples were in such a state. How could they just stand by and watch? Helping their fellow disciples fight was definitely not wrong. Fight. Thus, the scene was like a rolling snowball as everyone threw caution to the wind. Although most people didn't know what was going on, it was the general trend. Occasionally, there would be some clear-headed people who wanted to stop, but they couldn't. If you didn't fight, someone would fight. If you wanted to fly up to the sky, there would immediately be a few people who would beat you down. Even a clay figurine had a temper. At this stage, if they didn't fight, they would be beaten. Other than fighting, what other choice did they have? Thousands of people fought together in a chaotic battle. It was a spectacular scene. Broken limbs were everywhere on the ground and blood dyed the forest. Behind them, there were still large numbers of people from the various powers rushing over to help. Zhang Zuansheng led several hundred people. From the start, he was the target of the various powers' attacks. At this time, he had already lost most of them. He could be said to be riddled with wounds. Although it wasn't a big deal, he had been harassed by all sorts of people. As for number 6, who was previously surrounded, no one knew where he was. He already had no time to care about himself, so why would he care about others? It was more like he didn't want his life anymore. Clang clang clang. Ah! I'll fight you to the death. Ah! Save me! The various lights and colors released by the artifacts were dazzling. Intense crashing sounds and miserable cries rang out everywhere. It didn't seem to stop. Right now, number 6 was also fighting in the chaotic battle. With his decent cultivation, he was fine. However, he also suffered many small injuries. The main reason was that the attacks were too concentrated. His clothes had become tattered. Blood splattered everywhere, covering his body. His face was already a mess. Who could recognize him? Actually, at this stage, with so many people coming and going, it was hard to tell who he was. Who could tell who he was? Yan Zhuixing? There were a few people present who had seen Yan Zhuixing before. Even if they knew number 6, who could tell him apart with his current appearance? They didn't have the time to do so. Flying swords and all kinds of magic weapons flew up like rabbits and fell like a cuckoo. The messy explosions made their ears buzz, and flesh and blood flew everywhere. Number 6 was dumbfounded. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. What are they doing? Forget it. I thought I was dead for sure. Since I have a chance to escape, why stay here? Number 6 took the opportunity to size up the situation. He suddenly leaped up and saw the people fighting in the air, taking the opportunity to launch a few sword astral slashes. In an instant, 5 or 6 people attacked him, forcing him back. The moment he landed, the messy attacks came again. He drew his sword and quickly pointed it in all directions. Chaotic sword chi burst out and blocked the attacks. Since he couldn't get out from the top, he gritted his teeth and fought towards the outside. From the attacks just now, he could tell that the people fighting on the top had higher cultivation. It was too difficult to get out from the top. It was impossible for a single person to deal with so many experts. It was safer to rely on his own cultivation to get out from the side. On the Hengduan mountain range at the border of the Redbud Kingdom, a group of spirit-severing experts heard the rumbling sounds of battle from afar. From the sounds of it, it seemed like the battle had reached its climax. They didn't know what was going on. The reason why everyone was here was to put pressure on the lords of the other factions and prevent them from interfering. At this time, Yin Baikong was calm and composed. He squinted his eyes as he stared at the people rushing in from all directions. There was a hint of arrogance on his face. Most of these people were disciples of the World Chamber of Commerce. They had never gathered like this before. This was the first time they had displayed their strength so valiantly. However, good steel should be used on the blade's edge. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. If they didn't use it now, when would they? As more and more people arrived at the World Commerce Association, the expressions of many soul formation experts changed. Usually, people only knew that the World Commerce Chamber was powerful and influential. Now that there was an endless stream of people rushing over, it gave them a great visual shock. The World Commerce was indeed very powerful. Everyone knew that this was only the people who came from nearby. Those who came from further away should still be behind, and no one knew how many there were. Beside Yin Baikong, Hu Changshuo's eyes flickered. Suddenly, both of them turned around at the same time. Qi Jiujuan, Ouyangde, and Pei Fong were the same. Pei Fong, who had lost a hand, laughed gloatingly, Bing Chengzi is here. The three of them looked at each other. They were somewhat excited, but there was no need to say anything. No matter how high Bing Chengzi's cultivation was, how could he be a match for so many soul formation experts? Once Bing Chengzi died, the three of them would benefit the most from this. Xiao. A high-speed flying sound that could only be produced by a soul formation final stage expert and above could be heard. All the soul formation experts turned around to look. Another soul formation final stage expert was coming from that direction. Who else could it be other than Bing Chengzi? The 5 soul formation final stage experts shot into the sky at the same time, forming a line to block the incoming person's path. Baikong was the first to speak. Brother Bing, why are you in such a hurry? We have been waiting for you for a long time, please stop for a chat. His chances of winning were the highest, so how could he let Bing Chengzi go now? He naturally had to find a reason to make Bing Chengzi stay. Moreover, the other 4 were on his side, so there was no need to be afraid of Bing Chengzi. Get out of my way. Before the person arrived, a wave of angry roars was the first to approach. As far as Chu Tian could see, there was a white dot rapidly approaching. Pei Fang, who had a broken palm, cackled, Bing Chengzi, if you know what's good for you, then stop. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Bing Chengzi arrived at this distance in an instant, but he did not show any signs of stopping. Their expressions changed. Before they could react, Bing Chengzi, who was flying towards them, shouted, profound palm. His palms flew towards them like dancing butterflies. A monstrous wave surged, and the temperature in the air instantly dropped below the freezing point. The few of them turned pale with fright. They saw a sky full of transparent palm shadows rushing towards them. Each palm shadow was as big as a dinner table, and there were at least 300 to 400 of them. In an instant, they arrived in front of the 5 of them. The 5 of them were startled. They did not expect Bing Chengzi to attack them without any warning. There were 5 of them here. Wasn't he a little too daring? Because they had underestimated Bing Chengzi's determination, the 5 of them were not prepared to attack. They were all so scared that they immediately teleported away. What a joke, Bing Chengzi's strength was beyond doubt. Other than Wen Lanfeng, it was him. Moreover, this profound palm was extremely insidious. It was a famous killer move that Bing Chengzi had cultivated by sitting on the Great Snow Mountain all year round and absorbing the cold air for thousands of years. Every time he used it, the cold poison in his body would be reduced. He would not use it unless he had no other choice. In short, it was very powerful. If they were hit by 1 or 2 palms, the 5 of them would probably have to go home to recuperate for a month or 2. How could they still fight here? The palm shadows disappeared, but the cold air was still there. Suddenly, there was a short burst of snowflakes floating in the clear sky, which looked colorful under the refraction of the sun. As soon as the 5 of them dodged, they saw Bing Chengzi rushing past them in a blur. Behind him was a huge white python that was as thick as a water bucket. Someone below exclaimed, "It's the Great Snow Mountain's guardian spirit beast, Snow Flood Dragon." Bing Chengzi even brought it here. Chapter 584. Not far from the Stone Jade City branch, on a mountain top that wasn't too high, Yu Qianqiu stood with his hands behind his back, looking into the distance. Occasionally, there was smoke curling up from chimneys in the mountains, not sure if it was a village or a hunter's house. Looking to the north, the outline of the entire capital of ACI could be seen. It was a scene of a vast land. Both Guan Zhongkai and Yulan stood behind him. They didn't know what he was thinking. They stood motionless for a long time. The two didn't dare to disturb him. They only secretly communicated with each other through voice transmission while exchanging glances. From time to time, there were cultivators flying past in the sky. This kind of frequent passing rate was rarely seen. They didn't know what urgent matter it was. It was estimated that the cultivators flying across the sky wouldn't notice the 3 people on the top of the mountain. However, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked up from time to time. Say, why do the cultivators who fly freely in the sky want to dominate the mortals who work hard on the earth? Yu Qianzhou suddenly waved his hand and pointed to the bustling capital in the distance and asked. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. They didn't know why he asked this, but this question was really difficult to answer. A person's grandmaster, a person's master, they were all lords, how could they make a rash judgment? But it was not good to not answer. Guan Zhongkai took a step forward and said with a smile, mortals are so ignorant, how can they be qualified to dominate the world? We cultivators move freely in the world, our vision is broad, we are naturally qualified to dominate them. Yulan also stepped forward and said, with senior's cultivation, sooner or later, you will also become a lord, there is no doubt about this. Yu Qianzhou looked around and asked again, when did the rule that cultivators can't interfere in the affairs of the secular world appear? The two of them were startled at the same time, they looked at each other questioningly, they both shook their heads slightly. Guan Zhongkai replied, this rule has been around for a long time, we really don't know when it actually appeared. Why does senior ask this? Yu Qianzhou said indifferently, do you think everyone follows this rule? Of course. Guan Zhongkai said with certainty, cultivators in the cultivation world basically don't interfere with worldly affairs. Everyone knows this. Then why are there still lords in each country? Take your grandmaster, Yin Baikong, and your master, Shangguan Taiping, for example. Aren't they meddling in worldly affairs? Yu Qianzhou asked. Guan Zhongkai was speechless. Even Yulan gave him a look and smiled, this is also for the good of the mortals in the secular world. As long as there are lords in each country, there won't be any chaos. Otherwise, when mortals fight for power and profit, how can there not be conflicts in hundreds of countries? I'm afraid there will be wars every day, and the mortals will be the ones suffering. Yes, yes, yes. That's the logic. Guan Zhongkai echoed. As far as I know, once a country's lord is annihilated by another country's lord, it's the start of a secular war. Start annexing the territories of the losers. Yu Qianzhou turned around and looked at the two of them, saying, because of this, almost every lord is pressuring the emperors of the secular world to maintain a state of war all year round in preparation for annexing territories. This. Yulan smiled bitterly, it's been like this for countless years. Senior, why do you worry about these mortals? Guan Zhongkai also nodded, yes. Yes. Yu Qianzhou coldly glanced at the two of them and continued, because the countries maintain a state of war all year round, the corvée labor and heavy taxes make the people suffer year after year. Even if they want to rebel, they will never be able to do so because of the interference of the cultivation world. Because the nobles of the various countries have the support of the cultivation world, they are not afraid of their power being overthrown. They take the opportunity to act recklessly and bully the common people. When a regime is rotten and can't take it anymore, it should be overthrown. This is the normal rule. The forceful interference of the cultivation world is against the natural order. The two of them were stunned at the same time and did not know what to say. Yu Qianzhou's words had subverted their common sense. Yulan asked tentatively, Senior, what do you mean? He. You don't have to be surprised. I was just saying. Yu Qianzhou smiled and turned around. There was no point in saying this to them. He narrowed his eyes and a cold glint flickered in his eyes as he examined the world again. During this period of time, he had seen too many hardships of the people's lives. Previously, he was limited by the geographical environment and thought that it was just a problem of the governance of a certain country. Who would have thought that after visiting so many countries, almost all of them were like this? He still could not understand why the common people did not rebel when they were forced to this point. While he was puzzled, he thought of the cultivation world, a colossus that mortals could not overthrow. The lords behind every country were the top experts of the cultivation world. Furthermore, these experts had great influence in the cultivation world. Mortals had no way of resisting at all. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan came to a realization. So he was just saying it casually. They thought that this senior Nyo had gone crazy. Why did he have to talk about mortals? His train of thought was too jumpy. The two of them could not keep up. Senior, shouldn't we make a move? Guan Zhongkai asked. There's no rush. It's too late. It won't be too late to leave tomorrow. Yu Qianzhou said and flew towards the Jade City branch. It's too late. The two of them looked at the sun above them. It was just past noon. Was it considered too late? What kind of logic was this? The two of them looked at each other helplessly. They were used to seeing Miao Yu's crazy actions along the way. They were not surprised at all. They quickly followed him. When they arrived at the inner hall of the branch, Yu Qianzhou waved to the two of them and said, I want to sleep. Don't let anyone disturb me without my permission. The two of them were speechless again. They could only obey. This was the first time they saw an expert who liked to sleep. On the flying artifact, he often slept soundly. What a freak. After the two of them left, Yu Qianzhou stared at Yin Baikong's portrait in the main hall. Although he had sparred with Yin Baikong in Dian Kingdom, the two of them had never met. However, from this portrait, Yin Baikong looked like a proper person. He had a sage-like demeanor. Humph. He snorted coldly and returned to the room he had prepared for himself. Then, he disappeared. In Utopia's military camp, Guan Yu and Zhang Peng were summoned. Zhang Peng had been assigned by Yu Qianzhou to be Guan Yu's adjutant. He was to assist Guan Yu in everything. After greeting each other, Yu Qianzhou did not waste any time. He directly asked, Zhang Peng, what's the cultivation level of the members in the military camp? Zhang Peng replied, there are around 3,000 in the early stage of tribulation passing and 3,000 in the nascent soul stage. There are also around 3,000 who have reached the core formation stage. Yu Qianzhou gave Guan Yu a questioning look. Guan Yu nodded, indicating that it was not bad. Zhang Peng, I have a mission for you this time. Are you confident that you can complete it? Yu Qianzhou smiled. Yes. Zhang Peng became excited. He could not help but ask, Master, what mission? Is it the same as last time? Yu Qianzhou nodded. Not bad, but the scale will be much larger than last time. Then, he turned to Guan Yu and smiled. Yun Chang, this guy lacks the experience of commanding battles in the cultivation world. This time, I'll let him come up with the battle plan. What do you think? Okay. Guan Yu agreed. There was an indescribable loneliness in his tone. Actually, he knew that ever since he publicly disobeyed boss's orders, the relationship between the two of them was not as good as before. Although boss still had a polite smile on his face, the fact that he suddenly appointed Zhang Peng as his adjutant was already a very deep meaning. In particular, there were a few regiment commanders who held great power in the military camp. Sometimes, they were more obedient to Zhang Peng than to him. Guan Yu also knew in his heart that these commanders were people that boss would contact in secret. These regiment commanders' attitudes were ambiguous, but boss's shadow was actually behind them. Before long, he would have to retreat behind the scenes, and the position of chief instructor would be given to Zhang Peng sooner or later. Because he understood this, he started to give up power to Zhang Peng. Intentionally or unintentionally, he highlighted Zhang Peng's position in the military. There was no need to fight for anything. In Utopia, no one could win against boss. Everyone knew that Yu Qianzhou was the leader of the entire Utopia. Zhang Peng could hear the loneliness in Guan Yu's tone, but he was not an idiot. No matter how rash a general who was once good at war looked, he would not be an idiot. Otherwise, how could he always win battles? Although his master did not say anything about his master suddenly assigning him to be Guan Yu's adjutant, he was well aware of his master's intentions after considering the entire sequence of events. "Master, I really do not have enough experience. I'm afraid I still need the chief instructor's guidance," Zhang Peng said sincerely and humbly. Guan Yu smiled and said, "You can do it. In terms of arranging troops, you are actually better than me." Yu Qianzhou silently looked at Guan Yu and sighed in his heart. It was good that they were both smart people. Otherwise, they would fall out with each other. It was good for everyone from start to finish. Originally, when Guan Yu publicly disobeyed his orders, he wanted to directly replace Guan Yu. There was no room for discussion. It would be terrible if he publicly disobeyed orders on the battlefield. However, Guan Yu's position in the army was not low. He was the chief instructor of all the team members. All the team members were trained by him. If he were to directly replace him, the impact would be too great. The morale of the army would be unstable. Furthermore, it would be difficult to find a suitable person to take over. Thus, he threw Zhang Peng over to be the adjutant to learn. He believed that Zhang Peng, who had rich experience in leading troops, would be able to take on the role in the future. From the looks of it, everyone knew what to do. That was good. Otherwise, he would have to use ruthless methods to cleanse them. It's decided. Zhang Peng will lead the organization. If there are any inadequacies, Yun Chang will give you more pointers. Yu Qianzhou changed the topic and said in a deep voice, "Gather everyone and stand by. Wait for my news." Yes. The two of them accepted the order in unison. However, Zhang Peng was a little confused and reminded, "Master, won't it be too conspicuous for so many people to go out at once?" He had followed them outside and knew how powerful those soul formation experts were. If they were discovered, it would be troublesome if they couldn't retreat in time. Knowing his concern, Yu Qianzhou sneered and said, "The looting outside is in full swing. This is the time when our defense is at its weakest. This is the best time to make a move." With that said, he disappeared. Chapter 585. Seeing that even the snow dragon had appeared, everyone could imagine that Bing Chengzi must have been forced into a corner. Everyone was even more certain about Yan Zhuixing. Someone clicked his tongue and said, "Bing Chengzi has even taken out his trump card. Looks like we have to save Yan Zhuixing." Seeing Bing Chengzi pass through, the 5 spirit severing stage experts were stunned for a moment before their expressions changed. Yin Baikong shouted angrily, "Bing Chengzi, don't go." Without needing to say anything, the 5 figures flashed and chased after Bing Chengzi. The group of people standing on the treetop of the Hengduan mountain range rubbed their palms together. If the 6 of them were to fight, it would be a good show. Someone shouted, "Let's go and have a look." In an instant, a group of spirit-severing stage experts flashed into the sky and chased after them. "Shuejiao, stop them!" Bing Chengzi shouted without turning his head, and continued to fly rapidly. Moo! A sound that sounded like a cow's moo resounded through the sky. The snow dragon swayed its body and turned around in the air. Its agility in the air was like that of a dragon. The snow-white shining armor shuttled back and forth in the air so fast that people could not see its figure clearly. It was like a soaring dragon in the sky. In an instant, it hovered in the air and stared at the people chasing after it with its bright red eyes. Its crystal-clear antler-like horns reflected magnificent colors under the sunlight. Moo! The sound reverberated through the sky again. A cloud of white miasma burst out from its horns. In the blink of an eye, it covered the sky and spun rapidly in the air. The snow dragon opened its bloody mouth and stuck out its tongue, blowing out a breath of cold air. The thick white miasma suddenly condensed into ice blades and swept towards the people chasing after it. Others might be afraid of it, but the 5 spirit-severing stage experts were not afraid of it. A transparent protective aura quickly appeared on its body and it did not slow down. No matter how the ice blades slashed on it, it forcibly passed through them. It was very powerful. The snow dragon had received its master's order. It would not give up after failing in one attack. It swung its long tail and fearlessly charged towards the 5 people. Accompanied by the wind and clouds, its speed was much faster than when it was flying with Bing Chengzi. Flying dragon in the sky, white dragon phantom. Its momentum was really amazing. The group of people chasing them from afar quickly stopped. He was afraid that this beast would not understand and start fighting with him. It was better to let the 5 experts deal with it first. Insolent beast. Qi Jiujuan flew at the front and bore the brunt of the attack. With a loud shout, the Junlin Qi suddenly appeared in his hand. A golden light burst out, and he slammed it at the snow dragon. Dang! The Junlin Qi and the snow flood dragon's crystal clear horn collided and sent Qi Jiujuan flying several hundred meters away. However, the snow flood dragon was also slammed down nearly 100 meters, but in the blink of an eye, it flashed back. The other 4 were startled and became serious. They took out their spiritual treasures. Obviously, they didn't expect this beast to be so ferocious. Qi Jiujuan's Junlin ruler was very powerful and had always been very powerful. Unexpectedly, Qi Jiujuan seemed to be slightly inferior in terms of strength. As expected of a spiritual beast of heaven and earth. The long white shadow did not stop and directly pounced at the other 4 people. From the looks of it, it still wanted to fight against 4 people? The 4 people were a little annoyed. For late-stage spirit-severing experts could not deal with a spiritual beast. If this news spread out, wouldn't they die of laughter? Beast, you're courting death. 100-blade cut. Pei Fong angrily shouted. The snow flood dragon actually charged at him. It was a little suspicious that he had lost an arm. Otherwise, why would it pick him who was standing in the middle? The blue beauty demon blade in his left hand turned into a phantom. Hundreds of blue blade shadows made xiao sounds and fiercely slashed at the head of the snow flood dragon. The other 3 people were not idle either. Their figures flashed quickly as if they were dragons in the sky. 2 rainbow-like sword shadows pierced the body of the snow flood dragon like lightning, splashing bright sparks in broad daylight. Qi Jiujuan, who flashed over, held the Junlin Qi with both hands and once again smashed at the head of the snow flood dragon. Bang! A very loud sound was heard. Moo! Another deafening bull's moo resounded. However, this time, there was a miserable sound. That's right. 5 late-stage spirit-severing experts were working together to deal with a snow flood dragon that was only equivalent to a mid-stage spirit-severing expert. It would be strange if it could still get away with it. However, this snow flood dragon's skin was really thick. At the very least, no wounds could be seen from its appearance. Just as the snow flood dragon's body fell down, a phantom chased after it. It was Ouyangda. His deadly claws had already protected his arms and palms. 2 sinister pitch-black claws locked onto the tail of the snow flood dragon with a "kacha" sound. What are you guys hesitating for? Stop Bing Chengzi! Ouyangda roared. He grabbed the tail of the falling snow flood dragon and quickly spun it. Such a thick and long snow flood dragon was actually spun like a windmill by him. The 4 people were slightly startled. Then, without hesitation, they flashed away and continued to chase after Bing Chengzi. The snow flood dragon, which was tens of meters long and as thick as a water bucket, spun into a big white wheel with a hoo-hoo sound. Ouyangda let out a breath and let out a hi sound. Then, he swung the snow flood dragon and smashed it downwards. A white shadow was thrown into the deep mountains while spinning. Soon after, a pile of trees fell down, followed by a loud peng sound. Ouyangda glanced down and coldly snorted, "Reckless beast." Then, he quickly chased after the few people in front. This happened in just a few moments, but the group of people behind looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know whether this spiritual beast was dead or not. However, since it was attacked by 5 soul transformation final stage experts, even if it died, it wouldn't die in vain. The group of people flew up into the sky and sized up the motionless white body in the pit. All of them revealed a look of pity. After being beaten up by 5 soul transformation final stage experts, even if it didn't die, it would be crippled. Now, they didn't have time to pay attention to it. Everyone glanced at it and then flashed away. Bing Chengzi also heard the miserable cry of the snow flood dragon. A trace of heartache flashed across his face. However, his expression turned ruthless and he didn't slow down. With the obstruction of the snow flood dragon, it was impossible for the people behind to catch up to him. This allowed him to arrive in advance and save Yan Zhuixing and his disciples, which was very advantageous for him. The battle in front was very intense and they could already see it. Man Hu and the other 3 who were fleeing in the mountain forest heard the mooing sound of a cow. 3 of the 4 people stopped. Yan Zhuixing, who rushed to the front, stopped and said in surprise, "Everyone, let's go. What happened to you guys? Is that the cry of the snow flood dragon?" Old 5 said in disbelief. Because the snow flood dragon never came down from the snowy mountain, how could it appear here? It's Master. Master has arrived. Master has brought the snow flood dragon down the mountain. Old 7 couldn't help but cheer. Yan Zhuixing looked at Man Hu with an inquiring gaze. The latter nodded seriously and said, "Yes, it should be Master." Just as he finished speaking, they heard a rapid loud sound coming from the sky in front, followed by the miserable cry of the snow flood dragon. The expressions of the 4 changed. Before they could calm down, they felt a violent vibration coming from under their feet. A pang sound came from the forest in front of them. "Let's go and take a look." Man Hu waved his hand and the 3 immediately followed. When they arrived at the scene of the accident, they saw the forest had collapsed and there was a deep pit in the ground. The few of them surrounded the pit and saw the snow flood dragon shaking its head. Its chin was covered in blood and it was obviously injured. "Snow flood dragon, what happened to you?" Old 7 was the first to jump down and touched the snow flood dragon's head. The snow flood dragon probably heard Old 7's voice and let out a mooing sound in pain. Its voice lacked confidence. It was still shaking its head. It seemed to be dizzy from the spinning and had not recovered. The few of them jumped down. Only Yan Zhuixing was speechless as he looked at the big guy below. This was because he had never seen such a huge python with a horn on its head. Could it still be considered a snake? Under the concern of the few of them, the snow flood dragon stopped shaking its head after a while. Its red eyes began to spin. Looking at the 4 of them, it intimately stuck out its tongue and licked them. However, when it saw Yan Zhuixing above, it immediately revealed hostility. It slightly tightened its upper body and seemed to be about to attack. "He's one of us." Old 7 patted its head and the snow flood dragon calmed down. "Where's Master?" Man Hu frowned and asked. The snow flood dragon was shocked and seemed to remember its master. It jumped out of the pit and let out a mooing sound to the few of them below. When the 4 of them flew out, they saw the snow flood dragon stretching its body and rode on it without hesitation. Man Hu waved to Yan Zhuixing and said, "Young palace master, come up." Yan Zhuixing was stunned. Without hesitation, he rode on the snow flood dragon. Man Hu patted the snow flood dragon's body and the snow flood dragon shot into the sky with the few of them. In the blink of an eye, it carried the few of them and flew high up in the sky. Hearing this, Yan Zhuixing was secretly shocked. This white python with a long horn on its head was actually flying faster than them while carrying 4 people on its back. Could this be the legendary spirit beast? Bing Chengzi, who was flying at high speed, was slightly stunned. He saw hundreds of early divine transformation realm cultivators fighting in the sky ahead. What's the meaning of this? As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Bing Chengzi immediately thought of a possibility. Yan Juixing had already fallen into their hands and everyone was fighting over him. Black Yin Palm. Bing Chengzi rushed over and in a rage, he waved his palm at the group of people. Hundreds of palm shadows shot out with a boom. Bang, bang, bang. Ah ah ah. The group of people who were in a killing frenzy were instantly hit by the palm shadows. Dozens of people dizzily fell down. Bing Chengzi is here. Someone shouted. Actually, there was no need to remind them. Those who were not hit were also scared witless by the might of the Black Yin Palm. They had long stopped fighting and all of them teleported far away. The battered and exhausted Sikong Ju stood in the sky not far away with his sword in hand. This time, the World Commerce Company had suffered a huge loss. Even he himself had almost lost his life. He had never been in such a chaotic battle before. It seemed that everyone was more interested in attacking the World Commerce Company's people. They were very glad that they could last until now. Looking at the furious Bing Chengzi, Sikong Ju's battered and exhausted face was filled with uncertainty. He thought to himself, where are Master and the others? Bing Chengzi came from that direction. Could it be that Master and so many people couldn't stop Bing Chengzi? Chapter 586. The people who were fighting below were also startled by the shout of Bing Chengzi is here. They all subconsciously stopped fighting. They looked up dumbfoundedly and saw dozens of early spirit-severing realm experts fall down with a plop sound. The group of people immediately looked at the white-robed angry old man with great reverence. Bing Chengzi. Late spirit-severing realm expert. Master. Grandmaster. A mess of greetings sounded and many people rushed towards those early spirit-severing realm experts who fell down. Those who fell down were the seniors of many people's sect. How could they not show their concern? The dozens of spirit-severing realm experts who fell down were usually high and mighty. But now, their bodies were covered with a layer of frost, and they kept trembling and their teeth were chattering. Even the people who went to help them couldn't help but shiver when their hands touched them. So cold. Fortunately, these people were spirit-severing realm experts with high cultivation and could withstand it. If it was someone weaker, they would have been frozen into a popsicle and died after being hit by Bing Chengzi's Dark Yin Palm. One could imagine that Bing Chengzi's Dark Yin Palm was not a joke. Just a moment ago, it was still very lively, but now it was completely silent. Bing Chengzi looked at the bloody scene below and his eyebrows kept trembling. He couldn't see his disciple or Yan Juixing. A majestic killing intent surged out from his body, scaring the group of people who were trembling with fear and prepared to escape. Master. Suddenly, a voice that Bing Chengzi was very familiar with sounded. A guy covered in blood rushed up and saluted him, but he couldn't see his face clearly. However, Bing Chengzi recognized him immediately and shouted excitedly, "Old Six, you are still alive." That's right, it was Old Six who couldn't get out after rushing for a long time. Seeing his master suddenly appear, he was a little disbelieving. When he came to his senses, he immediately rushed up to greet his master. He. Disciple is very lucky and won't die. Old Six, whose face was covered in blood, grinned and revealed his white teeth. He was a little happy. Even he didn't expect that he could survive. Now that his master was here, he didn't have to be afraid. Seeing his disciple's tattered clothes and bloodied body, Bing Chengzi nodded his head vigorously. One could imagine how difficult it was for Old Six to survive until now. He had climbed out from a pile of corpses. As if he suddenly thought of something, he glanced around and cried out involuntarily, "Where are your senior brothers and the others?" The sixth brother glanced at the crowd and scratched his head in embarrassment. Just as he was about to speak, he heard someone shouting from afar, "Bing Chengzi, don't run." It was Pei Fang's voice. In the blink of an eye, the 5 of them arrived at the scene. The scene of blood flowing like a river made them temporarily lose interest in Bing Chengzi. All of them stared at the scene below with ugly expressions on their faces. Just by looking at the clothes on the ground, one could tell that there were people who had not died, and there were quite a few of them. Because the 5 of them were the most active and fought the most, they naturally died the most. The rulers who had hurried over were all dumbfounded. They had suffered great losses, and it was like cutting off their own flesh. Especially when he saw the dozens of early divine transformation realm cultivators who were covered in frost and shivering from head to toe, it was obvious that they had been hit by Bing Chengzi's dark Yin palm. Pei Fong shouted, "Bing Chengzi, what do you mean?" Although he shouted loudly, he didn't have the guts to fight Bing Chengzi alone. He had suffered losses in Bing Chengzi's hands more than once or twice, so he knew how terrifying Bing Chengzi could be. "What do you mean? There's something wrong with your brain." Bing Chengzi glanced at him and didn't have the time to care about him. He asked again, "Where are your senior brothers and the others?" The 6th brother scratched his head in embarrassment again. Suddenly, he was stunned and said in astonishment, "Senior brothers and the others should have escaped. Didn't Master encounter them? Escaped? Why are they still fighting so fiercely after escaping?" Everyone's gaze fell on him. Some of them were dumbfounded as they waited to hear the rest of the story. Bing Chengzi was startled. As soon as he rushed over, he heard the sounds of fighting and immediately stopped searching. He rushed over here with all his might and didn't pay attention to what was happening on the way here. Maybe he was really too late. "Your senior brothers and the others have left. Why are you here alone?" Bing Chengzi couldn't understand. The bloody 6th brother scratched his head again and laughed foolishly. He glanced at the crowd and said proudly, "These people are too much. Under such a critical situation, I separated from my senior brothers and the others. They continued to walk forward, while I walked in the opposite direction. When there was some distance between us, I pulled the sky-shaking sound arrow that I picked up to attract everyone here. I didn't expect these people to be so easily fooled. Hee hee. It was a silly dog-eat-dog fight for a long time." Everyone was shocked and looked at the 6th brother with a strange look. If what he said was true, then this guy really made everyone speechless. He was obviously sacrificing himself to cover his senior brothers and escape. Was there such a great person in the cultivation world? But how could he still survive after being beaten like this? No matter whether what he said was true or not, it was a miracle that he could survive after looking at the tragic scene below and the miserable state of his body. It didn't matter if others didn't believe him. Bing Chengzi believed his disciples' words. He pursed his lips and was proud of teaching such a disciple. It was worth it for him to come all the way here to save them. He nodded excitedly and said, "Good, good, good. As expected of my disciple." Yin Baikong could see that most of the people who died here were his world commerce's people. He shouted with a gloomy face, "Bing Chengzi, how are you going to explain this matter?" "Explain what?" Bing Chengzi knew that his disciple and Yan Zhuixing were fine and immediately calmed down. He stared at him coldly and said with narrowed eyes, "Just for a groundless thing, you actually dared to attack my disciple and still ask me how to explain it? I want to know how you are going to explain it. Bing Chengzi, don't give me that." Pei Fong continued, "If you don't give us a satisfactory answer today, don't even think about leaving." Bing Chengzi sneered, "Fatty Pei, don't brag too early. Since I dared to come here today, I was prepared not to go back. Fatty Pei, let me say this first. Today, even if both of us die here, we will first kill you before we die. I guarantee that you won't be able to escape. If you don't believe me, you can try. Killing one of you isn't much, but killing two of you isn't a problem." As he spoke, he sized up the other 4 soul formation final stage experts. His eyes were unusually fierce, as if he was picking another person to die with him. Which one of the top figures in the cultivation world wasn't a ruthless person? If he was forced into a corner, no one would doubt his determination. Pei Fang's chubby face stiffened. If Bing Chengzi really went all out to kill him, with his cultivation, it would be hard to say what would happen to him. Moreover, he was missing a hand now. The saber in his right hand had become a left-hand saber. He wasn't used to using it. The other four were stunned. Just like what Bing Chengzi said, he probably dared to come here alone because he was prepared to die. If Bing Chengzi wanted to go all out, could he kill one or two of them? Who could deny this with absolute certainty? The atmosphere immediately became a little strange. Although the master and disciple were surrounded, no one dared to make the first move. Since Yan Juexing had already escaped, it wasn't worth it to go all out against Bing Chengzi. The most important thing now was to find Yan Juexing. In Utopia, the army was ready for battle. Close to 10,000 people were evenly distributed according to the ratio of tribulation passing stage, nascent soul stage, and core formation stage. They were divided into 30 groups. In other words, in each group, there were close to 100 tribulation passing stage, 100 nascent soul stage, and 100 core formation stage cultivators. They were all mobilized. In order to seize the favorable opportunity, Yu Qianqiu personally scouted the place where they were going to attack as fast as possible. It was all thanks to the team members who had been sent out to scout the place. They had indeed made a great contribution. Of course, it was also related to his arrangements in advance. At that time, it was for convenience in the future. Yu Qianqiu looked at the black mass of masked people in front of him and sighed. This was the first time that all of them were mobilized. This time, they had chosen 90 countries to attack. There were 30 teams, which meant that each team had to attack 3 countries consecutively. This meant that he had to oversee the deployment of Utopia. Chen Feng and Guan Yu stood behind him. Guan Yu had a complicated look in his eyes. Were these people training for so long just for this day? Boss had probably used it once. There would probably be a second time, a third time. Chen Feng's group of subordinates were quickly distributing the necessary battle resources to everyone. Very soon, it was completed. Chen Feng's woman, Xiao Wanqing, was also watching from the side. From time to time, she would stare at Yu Qianqiu with a slightly resentful look. Yu Qianqiu unintentionally glanced at her and was slightly stunned. He realized that her belly was actually getting bigger. Was she pregnant? He avoided Xiao Wanqing's resentful gaze and deliberately didn't look at her. He tilted his head and looked at Chen Feng. He thought to himself, this guy is really free. Chu Ping had also led a group of women from Ethereal Palace over. She had received orders from Yu Qianqiu to bring people to handle logistics. She didn't know how big of a movement Yu Qianqiu was going to make this time. He actually mobilized everyone. However, when she looked at Yu Qianqiu, her gaze was also somewhat resentful. After coming, he didn't look for her. Instead, he gave her a rigid order. It was not romantic at all. At this moment, Zhang Peng and a group of leaders came out of the combat room. After the leaders dispersed, they quickly gathered the team leaders of their respective teams and distributed the map of the attack. They formed a circle and drew out the terrain on the ground to explain the distribution of the attack mission. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. It was fast and efficient. Their years of training finally showed results. After the leaders explained the mission clearly to the team leaders returned to their respective teams to explain the mission. After clarifying the mission as quickly as possible, they quickly reported back to Zhang Peng that their preparations were complete. Then, Zhang Peng ran to the front of the checkpoint and saluted. Reporting to the leader. Everything is ready. We can set off at any time. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and swept his gaze across the high-spirited team members. Their morale was not bad. He immediately flew above the formation. Chapter 587. He stared at the ground and memorized the sequence of attacks. Then, he slowly closed his eyes and established contact with the 90 attacking points in the outside world. His divine sense quickly spread out and enveloped the team members below. The teams disappeared one by one, and only one team remained. Their task was to be a substitute. Yu Qianzhou remained floating in the air with his eyes closed, maintaining contact with the 90 attacking points outside. The surroundings were quiet, and no one made a sound to disturb him. In a wilderness in Shiman country, a large area of rubble was piled up, forming a rocky hill. Experienced cultivators could tell that these were the rubble that had been produced by mining spirit stones. The rocky hill was a wasteland in the southern suburbs. Not even a single weed could be seen, and there were only piles of rubble. 300 masked men suddenly appeared out of thin air. The leader of the masked men quickly scanned the terrain and confirmed that it was their target. He faced the target and waved his arms forward. Attack according to the original plan. The 50th early stage tribulation passing expert quickly leaped into the air and pounced toward the first target. The communication formation was the first point they had to destroy. They had to destroy it at all costs as quickly as possible. They could not give the other party any time to spread the news. Once the other party spread the news of the attack, it might immediately attract strong reinforcements nearby. Although they did not know if there were strong reinforcements nearby, they could not take this risk. The first attack had to break the other party's throat. They could not let the other party make any sound to the outside world. Because of this, 50 of the 100 most experienced cultivators at the early stage of the tribulation passing stage were sent out to destroy the enemy's communication point. Enemy attack. A terrified cry came from the high ground. However, it only managed to make one sound before it was dismembered by 3 lightning-fast flying swords. 3 masked men in black landed on the high ground. The leader was the leader of this team. He was also the leader of Utopia's first team and enjoyed a high honor in Utopia. On both sides were the deputy leaders, and all 3 of them were early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators. The 3 of them stood with their backs facing each other and coldly looked at the 200 or so team members who had surrounded the entire spirit stone mine in broad daylight. Although the 3 of them were very confident in their combined strength, it could be seen from the position they were standing in that they were constantly on guard. This was the result of a long period of actual combat training. His tactical attainments were extremely high, and he would not allow any accidents to happen because of his arrogance. He had to be careful in every battle and treat it seriously. Although there was only one warning cry, it was enough to alert everyone in the mine. Inside the cave, inside the stone house, a large group of cultivators flashed out. Everyone first looked towards the observation point, but what they saw were 3 majestic masked men. A burly man with a curly beard stood out from the crowd. He was obviously the most important person here. Just as he was about to shout at the 3 masked men, he saw nearly 50 men in black forming a triangular formation and rushing towards a cave. The mustached man's expression changed, and he immediately reacted. These people wanted to destroy the communication array that connected to the outside world. He immediately shouted, "Stop them! Protect the communication array!" The group of people quickly shot up into the sky and chased after them. The guards outside the communication array also rushed to intercept them. The first person in the front corner of the triangular assault formation quickly made 2 hand gestures, and the 50 people all threw out their arrow talismans. Dense yellow lights whizzed out like rain, and the people who rushed to intercept them were immediately thrown into confusion. The last row of 10 people in the triangular formation immediately turned around and rushed back after throwing out the arrow talismans. The flying swords in their hands flew out, forming a sword net to strangle the people chasing them. On the spot, dozens of people let out mournful screams. Blood rained down along with dismembered corpses. Such a fierce and swift attack immediately scared the people who rushed over, and they didn't dare to continue. Some people even turned around and fled without hesitation. The triangular formation that had been shortened by a section plunged into the crowd of people blocking them. Flying swords flashed fiercely, and miserable screams rang out continuously. 10 people separated from each side of the triangular formation to deal with the opponents outside the cave. The remaining 20 people formed a small triangle that went straight into the cave entrance. There were 6 core formation stage cultivators guarding the cave entrance. Seeing that the attackers were so powerful, they were already scared silly. They didn't even fight, but they knew that they couldn't stop them. 4 people immediately ran to the sides, and 2 people turned around and ran back into the cave. Unfortunately, the 4 cultivators didn't run away. They were already surrounded outside, and the only thing waiting for them was to be killed without mercy. As soon as the small triangle went into the cave entrance, it immediately split into an even smaller triangle. 10 people directly rushed into the cave, and the remaining 10 people guarded the cave entrance. Soon after, 2 screams came from inside the cave, followed by a series of chaotic explosions. Soon after, the 10 people who rushed into the cave came out. The leader of the small team made a gesture of success to the leader on the high ground, indicating that they had successfully destroyed the communication array. This only happened in a few moments. From the moment they launched their attack to the moment they destroyed their target, the small team didn't even stop and directly rushed into the cave. Even the cultivator who was preparing to send a message to the sect was killed before he could activate the communication array. The leader made a gesture to the small team leader, and the small team immediately became the main force of the cleanup. 5 people in a group, they quickly scattered and killed. It was unknown what the 2 vice leaders said to the leader, but the leader made a gesture to shrink the encirclement, and an even more bloody and tragic massacre began. For a moment, screams rang out everywhere, and in this bloody web of over 300 people, no one could escape the final misfortune. The whole battle ended very quickly. In less than an hour, the ground was already covered in pools of blood. The wind was bleak, and the blood was very thick. Many people's bodies were torn to pieces, and those who died in one piece died with their eyes wide open. Their lifeless eyes reflected a group of black-clothed people shuttling back and forth, cleaning up the battlefield. Anything that was worth a bit of money was taken away. The entire team quickly gathered. 2 of them were clearly injured, and it seemed that their injuries weren't clear yet. They were carried back to the team. The 3 people on the high ground also returned to the team at the same time. The leader took one last look at the battlefield. From start to finish, it took less than an hour, and the mission here was successfully completed. He took out a small black flag from his storage bag and casually threw it at a large rock. With a ding, it stabbed into the rock. A gentle breeze blew, and the golden word, "Hero," fluttered in the wind. The leader raised his hand to touch the silver-coated nameplate on his chest and injected his divine sense. All the team members did the same. Even the 2 injured team members were helped to cover the silver-coated nameplates on their chests. They would return together. They wouldn't leave them behind. In Utopia's military camp, Yu Qianqiu, who was floating in the sky with his eyes closed, frowned slightly. He sensed the fluctuations of divine sense from the outside world. His divine sense surged out and traversed to the outside world. In the blink of an eye, a group of people returned successfully. These people didn't have time to rest. They removed one of the 3 storage bags from their waists and threw it to the side. 2 of the injured team members were carried out of the formation. 2 people immediately flashed over from the reserve formation and joined the battle formation. Then, the team disappeared from everyone's sight once again. They had completed one of the 3 attack points, but there were still 2 more that they hadn't completed their mission. Chu Ping waved her hand, and a group of women quickly flashed over. The 2 injured team members were carried away for treatment, and the storage bags on the ground were also cleaned up. After they left, another group of people returned after the battle. The various countries were mobilizing their manpower to snatch Yan Zhuixing, but Yu Qianzhou was taking advantage of the country's weakest defense to plunder the spirit stone mines. How could he let go of such a good opportunity? Everyone was afraid of Hero. Usually, there were many experts guarding the spirit stone mines, so it was very difficult to strike. Such an opportunity was hard to come by, so it would be a waste not to do it. If he wanted to do it, he might as well do it this time. It would probably be very difficult to succeed so easily the next time. Actually, Yu Qianzhou really wanted to strike at those places that were more profitable. Although spirit stone mines were places that produced spirit stones, very few people would store a large amount of spirit stones in a spirit stone mine in the wilderness. They would save up a little and send it back. However, it was different for the headquarters or branches of the world commerce. There were a lot of spirit stones circulating every day, so it would be a great harvest to strike a few of them. However, there were many people in such places, and they were all guarded by experts. It would be troublesome if they bumped into the experts who were doing business here. Not to mention the headquarters of the world commerce, even the branches of the world commerce wouldn't dare to act rashly with Yu Qianzhou's current strength, let alone the headquarters of the world commerce. With Bing Chengzi, who was currently the third most powerful person in the world, it would be a lie if the other 5 people didn't care once he made a move. It wouldn't be worth it to fight Bing Chengzi with all his might without even seeing Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing shouldn't have escaped far. Let's find Yan Zhuixing first. When the time comes, there will be a way to pry open his mouth. Whether it's a groundless matter like what Bing Chengzi said, we will know once we ask. Pei Fong changed his tone. Since he had misgivings about using force with Bing Chengzi, he might as well use another method. You dare! Bing Chengzi shouted. The profound ice sword had already appeared in his hand, and his aura had directly locked onto Pei Fong. The latter's expression stiffened, and he looked at the other 4 people. Yin Baikong carried the God of Fortune sword and said indifferently, "Brother Bing, everyone is here to clarify the matter. Everything will be clear once we find Yan Zhuixing. You better think it through. Don't go against the cultivators of the world. When the time comes, it won't look good for everyone." Bing Chengzi coldly stared at Yin Baikong, and his murderous aura was faintly discernible. The other 5 people immediately became alert. At this moment, high up in the sky, the sound of high-speed flying could be heard again. Everyone raised their heads and saw a white shadow flying over. Who else could it be other than the snow flood dragon? Immediately, someone clicked his tongue and said, "A spirit beast is indeed a spirit beast. It's actually fine." There seemed to be 4 people sitting on it. Man Hu and the other 3 who were riding on the snow flood dragon knew that the snow flood dragon was bringing them to find their master. However, when they saw the large group of people below from the sea of clouds, their expressions immediately changed. They had finally escaped from the wolf's den, but the snow flood dragon had sent them back. Wasn't this asking for death? Chapter 588. What does this snow flood dragon want to do? Yan Zhuixing asked. He even suspected that the sect wanted to offer him to settle the matter, but he felt that it was unlikely. Because if Bing Chengzi wanted to harm him, the curse on his body wouldn't let him off. Man Hu punched the snow flood dragon's back and shouted, "Snow flood dragon, turn around and run." Moo! The snow flood dragon responded with a loud cry. How could it run when its master was down there and the person who beat it up just now? Shaking its head and tail, it rushed down with a whoosh. "Master is down there!" Old 7 exclaimed. Since Bing Chengzi was here, Yan Zhuixing could only bite the bullet and continue. At least for now, it would be safer to stay by Bing Chengzi's side. Otherwise, it would be difficult to escape. Under everyone's gaze, the snow flood dragon arrived with 4 people on its back. It circled around Bing Chengzi and his disciple and let out a soft moo. Man Hu and the other 3 also rushed to Bing Chengzi's side and saluted. Bing Chengzi was startled when he saw the 4. Then, his face sank and he transmitted his voice to Man Hu, since you escaped, why did you come back? You're courting death. Man Hu replied helplessly, we met the snow flood dragon on the way. Who knew it would bring us back? It's too late to escape. The snow flood dragon stared at the five with its red eyes and tensed its body, ready to attack at any time. It remembered clearly that it was these 5 people who beat it up just now. Suddenly, it heard its master snorting unhappily. It turned its huge head and saw its master staring at it coldly. After living together for so many years, it knew clearly that its master was going to teach it a lesson. It shrunk back in fear, not knowing what it did to make its master unhappy. It weakly let out a moo. Bing Chengzi saw its snow-white head and lower jaw dripping with blood. Obviously, it was injured before. His heart softened and he turned his head away. Eldest senior brother. The bloodied 6th brother called out. Man Hu and the others looked over and immediately revealed an expression of disbelief. They said excitedly, you're still alive. They hugged each other with obvious excitement. They had a lot to say, but they knew this wasn't the right place. You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, only to find it by chance. Pei Fong sneered as he stared at Yan Zhuixing. Many people here had never seen Yan Zhuixing before, but almost all of the soul formation experts present knew him. Because they had met at Wen Lanfeng's place. Now, it was as if a monster had seen Xuanzang. All of them had a greedy look on their faces. Aya. Yin Baikong put on a fake smile and said, I should have guessed it long ago. When Brother Bing's disciple was still in the Chinese cultivation world, he was always protecting Yan Zhuixing. Naturally, there must be a reason. It turns out that he was hiding a big secret. Hu Changshou, who had been silent all this while, also said, I didn't expect Brother Bing to be so scheming. Bing Chengzi had completely calmed down. If his disciples and Yan Zhuixing had escaped, he would have fought to the death. But now, he couldn't afford to be impulsive. Don't be so weird here, you two. Others might not know, but don't you know? Do I look like an ambitious person? If I was ambitious, would I have waited until now? Bing Chengzi pointed at Yan Zhuixing and said, to be honest, this is my 8th disciple. I wanted to wait until he reached the Great Snow Mountain before officially announcing it to the public. I didn't expect everyone to be so impatient. When Yan Zhuixing was in the sacred ground of Baiwan Nation, he wanted to worship him as his master out of respect. But Bing Chengzi refused to be his master no matter what. Now that things had come to this, he could only use this reason. Yan Zhuixing glanced at Bing Chengzi without any expression. Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou looked at each other. From their expressions, it was obvious that they didn't believe Bing Chengzi's words. The former sneered and said, traveling thousands of miles, bringing a spirit beast down the mountain, and even falling out with us. 8th disciple? Brother Bing, don't you think this is too far-fetched? Bing Chengzi immediately replied sarcastically, those who are familiar with me know that I always treat all the disciples I accept as my own, regardless of whether they are close or distant. As for how you view your own disciples, I don't know. But don't put the same idea on me. Yin Baikong's face stiffened. It was indeed a failure to say such words in front of the disciples of the World Commerce Chamber. Everyone looked at the bloody old 6th and seemed to have realized something. Sacrificing himself to save others was probably related to the friendship between the master and the disciple. But understanding was understanding, no one would believe Bing Chengzi's words. Pei Fong stared at Yan Zhuixing and shouted, brat, if you don't have a guilty conscience, why did you escape? Yan Zhuixing said indifferently, I'm not a fool. I naturally know the terrifying consequences of this rumor. Do I have to be captured by you guys before explaining? If I really have a guilty conscience, I would have escaped earlier. Why would I return? There was no other reason. He just wanted to make this matter clear in front of the world so that there wouldn't be endless torment. The rumor about me possessing an extraordinary martial art is purely Niu Yu trying to harm me. As soon as he said this, he hit the crux of the problem. Bing Chengzi immediately gave him a praising look. Everyone else was stunned. That's right. If there really was something shameful, why would he come back to die if he had already escaped? They naturally didn't know that Yan Zhuixing and the rest were brought back by the snow flood dragon. Everyone subconsciously looked at the bloody scene before them and their expressions twitched. If it really was a rumor spread by Niu Yu, then this loss was not worth it. But no one would believe him just because of one sentence. Pei Fong's fat face shook as he sneered, "That's hard to say. Maybe you knew that sooner or later you wouldn't be able to escape from our palms. You can escape today, but not tomorrow. So you purposely did the opposite and spread lies to mislead everyone. Hee hee. You've got guts. Do you really think we're so easy to fool? For Bing Chengzi's sake, as long as you tell us your extraordinary martial art, we can consider letting you go." That's right. The top experts looked at each other and echoed. Fatty Pei, I think you're really tired of living. How dare you threaten my disciple in front of me? Bing Chengzi shouted. He knew that in this kind of situation, he couldn't show any signs of weakness. Otherwise, everyone wouldn't mind joining forces to beat him down. Only by being strong would everyone have some misgivings. Man Hu and his fellow disciples also revealed a look of not hesitating to fight to the death. All of them held their weapons and cheered for their master. This scene made everyone secretly sigh. This was indeed a sect that was as close as a father and son. If it was their own disciple, he would have shown fear under the pressure of so many experts. How would he dare to risk his life against a spirit-severing expert? Master, please calm down. Yan Zhuixing bowed to Bing Chengzi and said, "The more I argue, the clearer it becomes." Master, please allow disciple to argue. Bing Chengzi snorted and agreed. Thank you, Master. Yan Zhuixing turned to Pei Fong and said, "May I ask Senior a question?" Speak. Pei Fong sneered, "Let's see what tricks you can come up with." Yan Zhuixing said calmly, "From Senior's words, you seem to think that Junior has a peerless martial art. Do you think that my master already knew about this?" Kid, it's not that I think so, but everyone thinks so. Pei Fong waved his broken hand and pointed to the surroundings. It's human nature. It's understandable. Yan Zhuixing nodded and said, "May I ask Senior, if my master already knew that I had a peerless martial art and the ambition to conquer the world, would he let me live until now? Would he have allowed me to live until now? Wouldn't he have taken me to Snowy Mountain when everyone didn't know and forced me to use the peerless martial art to cultivate? Wouldn't that be safer? Wouldn't he have waited until Niu Yu misled the crowd and made everyone come here to kill each other? Then he would come to save me at all costs. Don't you think it's suspicious?" This series of questions was thought-provoking. Especially the phrase, "kill each other," it made everyone's hair stand on end when they saw the bloody scene. What was Niu Yu trying to do? Was he trying to incite everyone to kill each other? Everyone couldn't help but ask themselves. Yes. If Bing Chengzi knew that Yan Zhuixing had a peerless martial art, he would have already made his move on Yan Zhuixing. Why would he wait for everyone to fight for it? The group of people judged Bing Chengzi's heart with their own selfish hearts and felt that it was impossible. They looked at each other in dismay. Even Pei Fong was speechless. "All of you are possessed." Bing Chengzi snorted coldly, but he looked at Yan Zhuixing with more and more admiration. He was indeed the inheritor of the demonic book. His ability to deal with emergencies was incomparable to ordinary people. Yan Zhuixing looked around and cupped his hands at everyone. He continued to strike while the iron was hot. Does everyone know who that Niu Yu is? Does everyone know where that Niu Yu came from? I'm afraid no one knows, right? I've even heard that Niu Yu cheated every one of your spiritual stones. I just can't figure it out. Everyone believes in the words of a big liar that everyone knows. This junior doesn't know what to say. Is it really that trustworthy? This guy was quite eloquent. If Yu Qianzhou heard him, he would probably jump out and argue with him to see who was better and who was better. Everyone seemed to have woken up from a dream, but none of them looked good. Thinking about how they were cheated by Niu Yud once, it was already a huge joke. If they were cheated by him again, how could they endure it? Many people had already cast their gazes at Shengguan Taiping. If it wasn't for him, how could this happen? Shengguan Taiping felt guilty from everyone's gazes. He had an awkward expression as he realized how hard it was to be a good person. Yin Baikong looked below with resentment. His world commerce had suffered the greatest loss. He then looked around and realized that there was still an endless stream of world commerce disciples rushing over. His face turned black as he slowly turned his head to look at the battered Sikongju. Sikongju's heart thumped and he tasted bitterness in his mouth. This news was from his own disciple, and he had confidently told his master. If he was cheated again and caused such a huge loss, how could he raise his head in world commerce in the future? Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. Sikongju teleported in front of Yin Baikong and said with a bow, "Master, one's words cannot be trusted. Niu Yud will be arriving at the headquarters in a few days. If this Yan Zhuixing is really magnanimous, why not let him follow us back to the headquarters? At that time, he will confront Niu Yud and we will naturally be able to determine the truth." Chapter 589. Yin Baikong's eyes lit up and slightly nodded, "That's right. Brother Bing, it's easy to prove your disciple's innocence. Let him follow me to the headquarters and confront Niu Yud. At that time, everything will be clear. If it really has nothing to do with Yan Zhuixing, I promise to send him safely back to Snowy Mountain." At the same time, he looked at Sikongju with a gentle gaze. This method was simply the best for him. Once Yan Zhuixing meets with Niu Yud, whether it's true or not, his world commerce wouldn't be able to escape. If Niu Yud could prove that Yan Zhuixing indeed had a peerless martial art, then everyone wouldn't need to fight over him anymore. Yan Zhuixing was already in his hands. If Niu Yud was lying, then he wouldn't be able to leave the world commerce so easily. One must know that the headquarters of the world commerce was filled with experts. With Yin Baikong personally overseeing it, 2 spirit-severing disciples, and a bunch of late-stage crossing tribulation experts, not many people in the cultivation world could come and go as they pleased. Yan Zhuixing didn't know what to say. There was no reason to refuse. He couldn't help but look at Bing Chengzi. Bing Chengzi naturally couldn't let Yin Baikong take Yan Zhuixing away. Although he repeatedly denied the fact that Yan Zhuixing had a peerless martial art, he was well aware that what Niu Yud said was true. Just think about it, Niu Yud was actually able to see through Yan Zhuixing's background with a single glance. With such ability, Yan Zhuixing would probably have nowhere to hide in front of him, and he wouldn't be able to hide it even if he wanted to. At that time, he would probably not be able to return. Everyone's gazes also looked at Bing Chengzi to see what he would say. To prove Yan Zhuixing's innocence, Sikongju's method was the best. If he didn't agree, then he definitely had a guilty conscience. He. Then don't blame everyone for being impolite and snatching what should be snatched. Yin Baikong, I don't deny that your method isn't good. Bing Chengzi said in a deep voice, but if I let you take my disciple away in front of me today, then where would I put my face in the future? If I can't even protect my own disciple, then as his master, I won't be able to show my face in the future. Hearing this, many people exchanged glances. Sure enough, he still had a guilty conscience. All of them stared at Yan Zhuixing with interest, eager to make a move. He. Yin Baikong smirked and said, "Brother Bing, this won't do, that won't do. Do you have any way to prove Yan Zhuixing's innocence? Now that things have come to this, I'm sure you're also aware that this matter has to be resolved." Seeing that everyone was pressuring their master, the hot-tempered seventh disciple could no longer bear it and shouted, "What have we done wrong to you? We need to prove our innocence to you." Baikong's gaze was like lightning as he stared at the seventh brother. He sneered and said, "This old man is talking to your master. Since when is it your turn to interrupt?" Bing Chengzi raised his hand slightly and stopped the furious seventh brother from speaking again. He said to Baikong, "I naturally have a way to prove Yan Zhuixing's innocence." "Oh. Then we'll be all ears." Baikong put on a fake smile. Obviously, he didn't believe it. Everyone stared at Bing Chengzi, waiting to see what he could say. Bing Chengzi's cold eyes swept across the crowd. With a wave of his hand, the profound ice sword suddenly appeared in his hand. This action startled everyone. They all thought that he was going to make a move. Who knew that a dang sound could be heard? Bing Chengzi flicked the sword with his finger and a crisp sound reverberated in the air. He raised the sword and said in a clear voice, "Bing Chengzi, swear to the heavens that if my disciple Yan Zhuixing possesses a peerless martial art, let me, Bing Chengzi, die a horrible death in the future." Absolute silence. Everyone was silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. They didn't expect Bing Chengzi to be so ruthless. He even made a deadly oath. This, Baikong and the others looked at each other. If they didn't believe it before, then what about now? Even if they were beaten to death, they wouldn't believe that Bing Chengzi would use his life to make a false oath. Man Hu and the others who recovered from the shock couldn't help but shout, "Master!" Yan Zhuixing silently stared at Bing Chengzi. He owed this sect too much. Only the few of them knew that Yan Zhuixing did possess a peerless martial art, the demonic book. However, their master made a false oath. This would definitely be punished by the heavens in the cultivation world. Bing Chengzi waved his hand at them and said, "It's nothing. Since we can't explain it clearly to them, we'll use facts to prove it. Otherwise, we'll have endless troubles in the future." He then stared at the five of them and said indifferently, "Everyone, do you believe me now?" Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan, and O Yangda looked at each other. They felt it was a pity to let Bing Chengzi go just like that. Originally, they wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. However, it wasn't a good time to do so. Once they started fighting, Baikong and Hu Changshu wouldn't just sit back and watch. Baikong and Hu Changshu's expressions were a little awkward. The former smiled and said, "Brother Bing, don't misunderstand. Since the matter has been clarified, it's naturally fine. I hope Brother Bing won't take it to heart and understand." The change was really fast. However, the three of them were originally in a group of benefits. As long as there weren't any other benefits that could split the three of them, the past would naturally be the past. After all, they still had to deal with each other in the future. They were all experienced people and wouldn't be swayed by their emotions. They only knew what was true. "Humph." Bing Chengzi coldly snorted and said, "Let's go." Under everyone's gaze, the master and disciples rode on the snow flood dragon and soared into the sky. "Brother Bing, have a safe journey." Baikong and Hu Changshu cupped their hands and sent them off. The group of gathered experts looked down again. They didn't know where their anger came from. Baikong pointed down and stared at Sikongju as he shouted, "What exactly is going on? Yan Zhuixing and the others have already escaped. Why are you all still fighting here?" Sweat appeared on Sikongju's forehead. He didn't know what the hell was going on. He turned around and called Zhang Zuansheng, who was also battered and exhausted, to question him. The lords of various countries also gathered their subordinates to reprimand them, asking them what exactly was going on. In the end, after a long discussion, one of them said that he saw someone fighting and went to help, while the other said that he saw someone fighting and went to help. They didn't know what they were fighting for. Only in the end did they understand. The main culprit was Bing Chengzi's disciple. Because he released the sky-shaking arrow to lure the enemies, a group of people swarmed over and messed up the plan. This made the lords of various countries unbearably angry. This matter definitely couldn't be blamed on Bing Chengxi's disciple. He didn't do anything to provoke him. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for being blind. As a result, they all started scolding him. The lords of various countries had a bellyful of anger. Before they even returned to their own territories, some of them were already furious. Hero had looted 90 spirit stone mines in half a day. At the same time, he had committed crimes in 90 different countries. Every country was shocked. Hero had obviously taken advantage of the time when the country's defenses were at their weakest. However, Hero didn't go too far this time. He only killed people and didn't blow up the mines. However, the number of cultivators killed in 90 mines added up to a terrifying number. Although most of them were low-level cultivators, there were more than 20,000 cultivators. On average, there were 200 to 300 people killed in each mine. Not a single one survived. This was a shocking massacre. He had killed more than 20,000 cultivators. The entire cultivation world was a little dumbfounded. This hero was too ruthless. How could he do it with so many people? As a result, they all condemned Hero. What made all the countries palpitate was that 90 different locations were attacked at the same time. How many people did he use? When did such a huge force hide in the cultivation world, and no one knew about it? The unknown was the scariest, and the unknown intentions were the scariest. For a moment, all the countries felt insecure. When talking about Hero, their expressions changed. They all mobilized people to protect the important locations, afraid that Hero would come to them again. The cultivation world, which had been a little restless recently, suddenly became much quieter. Currently, many people in the cultivation world were very depressed. Yu Qianqiu was one of them. After receiving the news that Yan Zhuixing was safe and sound, he was extremely depressed. He didn't expect that Yan Zhuixing would still escape even after being forced to such a state. Didn't this mean that Yan Zhuixing was indeed a character from another angle? On a flying magical artifact, Yulan was controlling it. The wind and clouds brushed past the ship's side, quickly flying over thousands of mountains and rivers. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting at the back, suddenly sighed, "Scourge. Scourge." He felt that the harder it was to kill Yan Zhuixing, the more powerful he was. If he was left alive, he would definitely be a scourge in the future. He didn't know what logic was behind this. "Senior, who are you calling scourge?" Guan Zhongkai asked expressionlessly. After knowing that Yan Zhuixing was fine, he was also in a bad mood. He had already been scolded by Sikongju, who said that he would deal with him when he returned. Since even his grandmaster had confirmed that Yan Zhuixing was fine, it was most likely that Niu Yud was lying. This time, he had really caused his own death. However, this fella's cultivation was too high. Putting aside the fact that he couldn't beat him, he didn't even dare to scold him. He didn't even dare to show his face. Yulan, who was controlling the flying magical artifact, didn't look any better. His master, Shengguan Taiping, even had the heart to kill him. Who asked him to lie about military intelligence, causing his master to offend a large group of people. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, then sighed, "Nothing, I was talking about the hero. This hero is really a scourge. He actually killed so many people." Sigh. Scourge. These 2 days, he had heard many people talking about the hero. Then where does Senior think the hero came from? Guan Zhongkai said perfunctorily. "You're asking me?" Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose, then suddenly chuckled, "If you ask me. Other than your World Commerce Association, I really can't think of anyone else with this ability. Think about it. The hero obviously took advantage of the moment when the country's defenses were at their weakest. Such a large-scale attack, it was obvious that they were prepared. And regarding Yan Zhuixing's matter, your World Commerce Association was the first to know, right? You also had the best chance to set it up in advance, right? Plus, World Commerce Association has so many people and that kind of ability. So, this so-called hero is actually most likely your World Chamber of Commerce. Chapter 590. Senior's joke is too big. Guan Zhongkai's tone was not very confident and his eyes were slightly dazed. Hearing Niu Yud's words, he thought of something. As the third-generation head disciple of the World Commerce Association, he knew that the World Commerce Association was not as simple as it looked on the surface. Even though he was not deeply involved in some things, he still felt that something was wrong. Grandmaster Yin Baikong, other than having many wives and children, he also had many disciples. Who in the cultivation world didn't know that Grandmaster was very good at teaching disciples? He had taught 2 soul formation disciples and there were at least 100 tribulation passing experts. He didn't even know how many martial uncles he had. This was also one of the main reasons why the World Commerce Association was so powerful in the cultivation world. In the eyes of outsiders, these martial uncles were the backbone of the World Commerce Association's headquarters. They were always stationed in the treasure bowl and Grandmaster Yin Baikong rarely used them. But he unintentionally discovered that these martial uncles seemed to be doing something in the dark. There was once when he went to ask his master but was reprimanded by his master, telling him not to worry so much and to do his own thing. Guan Zhongkai had always had doubts in his heart but hearing Niu Yud's words, he was suddenly enlightened. At the same time, he was secretly shocked. Could it be that hero was really a force of the World Commerce Association? Yu Qianzhou's eyelids twitched when he saw his appearance. He glanced at Yulando who seemed to be listening attentively and his lips curled into a smile. Then he poked his head out and said patiently, "I'm right. Did you remember something?" "Ah." Guan Zhongkai came back to his senses and repeatedly denied, "Senior, you can't say such things. Our World Commerce Association is definitely not a hero. Think about it. Our World Commerce Association is also one of the victims this time. A spirit stone mine was also bathed in blood by hero. He. You can fool others but you can't fool me." Yu Qianzhou winked and smiled evilly. The reason why hero looted World Commerce Association spirit stone mine was to help World Commerce clear of suspicion. Otherwise, others would always suffer and only your World Commerce Association would be fine. Plus, only World Commerce Association has the ability to do such a big thing. It would be strange if outsiders didn't suspect you. That's why. Your World Chamber of Commerce is very smart and ruthless. In order to deceive people, they killed their own people to divert everyone's suspicion. The more Yu Qianzhou spoke, the more reasonable it became. Even the fake became the truth in his words. This gave Guan Zhongkai a fright. In particular, when he subconsciously turned his head to look at Yulando in front of him, he saw that Niu Yud was listening attentively to their conversation. This caused Guan Zhongkai to groan incessantly. He wanted nothing more than to stuff Niu Yud's mouth with something. He could only blame himself for having nothing better to do. Of all the things he could have asked, he had to ask this question. If word of this got out, the World Commerce Association would immediately become the target of public criticism. At that time, Master would definitely skin him alive. Absolutely impossible. Senior might not know this, but back then, the first person hero kidnapped was my Grandmaster's grandson. This matter was known by the entire cultivation world. This robbery of the Spirit Stone Mine is the second time they have targeted our World Commerce. If our World Commerce is a hero, we can't always target ourselves. Guan Zhongkai couldn't wait to clear his name. Since the journey is boring, Laozi will play with you. Yu Qianzhou sneered and lazily leaned on the back of the boat, saying, "Don't argue, some things can't withstand scrutiny. Let me ask you, why did Hero kidnap someone from your World Commerce Association the first time he appeared and not someone else? Did they want to show that they had nothing to do with World Commerce Association the moment they appeared? Also, why did the hero only harm others once, but only your World Commerce Company twice? Little did they know, the more someone tries to clear their name, the more suspicious that person is. This. Guan Zhongkai's forehead was covered in sweat from his words. He looked at Yulandu in front of him from time to time and said with a bitter smile, "Senior, Hero really has nothing to do with our World Commerce Association." I said, "Don't argue with me." Yu Qianzhou crossed his legs and said, "If you continue to argue, do you believe that I can even deduce the reason and motive behind your actions?" Guan Zhongkai was truly speechless. If he didn't continue to argue, did he have to admit the truth? After thinking about it, he decided not to say it. If he continued, he would definitely get sick from fright. He immediately changed the topic. "Senior, let's get down to business. Last time you said that Yan Zhuixing had exceptional martial arts, but after my grandmaster and the others investigated, it was completely false. We're about to reach World Commerce Association, have you thought about how to explain it to my grandmaster?" Actually, Guan Zhongkai had always been puzzled. The matter had been exposed, proving that Niu Yud was lying, but why did Niu Yud still look as if nothing had happened? Was he not afraid at all? Investigation? Yu Qianzhou said disdainfully, "Only found a false result? Your Grandmaster Yin Baikong's foresight is very suspicious. Let Yan Zhuixing try in front of me, humph. Others might not know, but do you think you don't? Did you forget the scene of Yan Zhuixing fleeing after being exposed by me that day?" With this said, Guan Zhongkai recalled the scene of Yan Zhuixing and the others leaving that day. It was indeed very suspicious. He couldn't help but nod. "I'm afraid you'll have to personally explain this matter to my grandmaster. We won't be able to explain it clearly." "Explain my ass, it's up to him whether he believes it or not. I didn't ask him to chase after Yan Zhuixing, it's none of my business." Yu Qianzhou sneered, "So what if I don't explain? What can your grandmaster do to me?" "Crazy." Guan Zhongkai was stunned. He was still hoping to bring him to the headquarters and let him explain to Grandmaster himself. If he explained clearly, he would feel better. But from his tone, he actually wanted to play hard on Grandmaster. If he angered Grandmaster, then wouldn't it be a great sin for him as the person who brought him here? Endless towering mountains and precipitous ridges, a primordial forest left from ancient times. Under the endless greenery was eerie and terrifying. The forest was densely covered with wisteria, and all kinds of ferocious beasts frequently appeared, letting out fierce roars. This was within the borders of the Tu-An nation, where the World Commerce Association was located. Yu Qianzhou lay on the side of the flying artifact, looking at the retreating mountain scenery below. Only cultivators would settle down and live in such a dangerous place. If it was a mortal, it would probably be very difficult to go deep. He played with a pile of silver balls in his hands, and occasionally threw one down, as if he was shooting birds. The other two felt their teeth ache watching. The mountain terrain in front suddenly became dangerous, and there were occasional mountain peaks that rose abruptly. Yu Qianzhou walked to the front of the flying artifact, and saw clouds and mist swirling in the distance. There was a tall mountain standing in the clouds and mist. Although it wasn't very tall, its altitude was obviously higher than the surrounding mountains. In the midst of being ethereal, it had a bit of a fairyland feeling. Yu Qianzhou raised his chin and asked, "That should be the God of Wealth Peak, right?" Guan Zhongkai, who had switched hands to control the flying artifact, replied, "That's right. The place protected by the clouds and mist is the cornucopia, and that highest peak is the World Commerce Association's headquarters, the God of Wealth Peak's core area." Saying this, he shook his head with a bitter smile. "Speaking of which, it's all thanks to Senior. We can directly land on the God of Wealth Peak, and don't need to enter from the entrance. In all these years, this is the first time I have the right to directly descend upon the god of wealth peak. Yu Qianzhou folded his arms and rubbed his chin. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Entering from the entrance, I want to see what the world-renowned cornucopia looks like. Guan Zhongkai nodded and didn't say much. In reality, he was also a little apprehensive because he had made a mistake and didn't dare to see his grandmaster. If he could delay it, it would be good to see him later. Very soon, the flying artifact landed at the foot of the mountain between two peaks. These two mountains weren't tall, but they looked quite strange. They were like twins, almost identical in appearance. Standing at the edge of the clouds and mist, they were like two guards standing there silently, adding a bit of mystery to this place. Guan Zhongkai put away the flying artifact and said to Yu Qianzhou, who was looking around, "Senior, please follow me." Yu Qianzhou nodded and followed the two people in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. After going deep into the clouds and mist, he realized that this fog was really not ordinary thick. With his cultivation, his visibility was at most 3 meters. After walking between the two mountains, he realized that there was actually a cliff in front of him. A chain bridge extended from the clouds and mist to the side of the cliff. Judging from the direction of the thick main chain that was pulling the suspension bridge, the fixed place should be between the two mountains. Walking on the bridge, Yu Qianzhou didn't understand. What's the meaning of this? Can't we just fly over directly? Why do we need to make a suspension bridge? Guan Zhongkai walked as he turned back and explained, "Senior, you may not know this, but because this is where our sect's headquarters is located, the security here is very tight. This cloud and mist isn't an ordinary defensive formation, it's an extremely powerful killing formation. The only way for outsiders to enter and exit this place is this suspension bridge. When crossing this bridge, if anyone leaves the vicinity of this bridge, they will immediately be sucked into this killing formation. Of course, people with the sect's permission will open other paths to enter and exit." Yu Landu also turned back and said, "Also, this path can be sealed at any time." Yu Qianzhou clicked his tongue and said, "This defense is indeed quite tight. It's very hard for people who want to go in and cause trouble to break in. It's even harder for people who want to come out after causing trouble to escape. That's natural. The World Commerce Association has always done its best to provide the safest trading ground for cultivators in the world." Guan Zhongkai said rather proudly. The three of them walked for nearly 200 meters before reaching the end of this bridge. In front of them was a cave. On both sides of the cave, there were two large tiger heads peeking out. They were very lifelike and looked like they were made of black iron. The two main chains of the suspension bridge were spat out from the tiger's mouth. It was very mighty and extraordinary. After entering the cave, it was bright inside and was filled with fluorescent stones for illumination. About 5 or 6 meters into the cave, they discovered that there was a stone room dug out on both sides of the cave. There were several cultivators sitting in each room. Yu Qianzhou looked left and right and found that there was actually no one he could see through their cultivation. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.